IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Sorry we're late. We were talking about, I'll give you guys a hint, Penn State. Imagine that. So we were talking a little bit about that, a little bit about the college football playoff rankings, and this weekend, obviously, guys, is going to be another weekend where the college football playoff rankings will be adjusted based on outcomes. And, of course, Notre Dame plays in one of those games that will sort of tell us a little bit about if Notre Dame is continuing to grow as a dominant team, or do they take a little bit of a step back? We're going to find that out. So this is Trevor Troberts. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are going to go over our keys to victory for Notre Dame. You guys know the drill, right? It's Thursday. We're going to go over our keys to victory, offense, defense. Then we'll get into our score predictions. We'll talk about how we see the game played. Ryan's predicting Notre Dame to lose. I'm just going to leave that hanging out there until he can correct me in about an hour. But I just want you all to be like mad at him for like an hour. You know, just yell at him in the chat. He didn't really pick him to lose. And then we'll hand out game balls and all that good stuff. And then these guys will take off. And then I'll be joined by Bill Bender to preview the slate of college football. There's not a lot of great games this weekend, guys, which means there's probably going to be a lot of great games. That's how this season has gone, right? Every time we're like, yeah, not a lot of great games this weekend, mass upsets. So we're going to find out who's this week's Georgia Tech, who's this week's Vanderbilt, who's this week's Arkansas. So we're going to find that out, guys, and just hope that team is not from Charlottesville, Virginia.
I hope it's Florida.
That would be nice. That would be nice. So, fellas, but first of all, before we get started, how you guys doing today? You guys ready?
Wonderful, man. Wonderful. I got roped into covering a little bit of LSU, Florida this week, which is kind of that was a little bit in jest there. But yeah, man, everything's good. Everything's good.
Are you just covering from home, or are you actually going down there?
No. They just needed help with extra coverage of,
that'd be pretty awesome.
Key matchups and all that type of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
that'd be pretty awesome. Be pretty awesome.
The swamp.
Yeah, I say I've been inside the swamp, Ryan, but I've never been inside of it for a game. I had a friend that was doing her master's degree down at University of Florida, and I went down there to visit her, and she took me inside the swamp. You could just like walk in, walk into the stadium, and it's pretty cool layout.
One of my best friends who's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their scouting department. He grew up a lifelong Florida Gators fan, and he's never been to a game, but he is going to be in the swamp this weekend, man. And funny enough, he was actually in the recruiting department at LSU. So like, it's going to be a very interesting game for him this weekend, to say the least.
Very, very much so. Very much so. Well, Trevor, Notre Dame is a 23-point favorite over Virginia this weekend. The old Tigers are a 4-point road favorite over Florida. So going to be some interesting action this weekend, Trev. I believe that there could be, which makes me think of something. I don't know what it is.
I think I know where you're going with this one, Brian. If I were a betting man, I think I know which way you're going. And I am. And there's no better way to bet than with Irish Breakdown's new partners over at MyBookie. Okay, MyBookie is one of the better sports books out there. Okay. What you're going to want to do with them is when you go and you sign up, you're going to want to use promo code Irish. What that's going to do for you is it's going to give you a deposit bonus. So, for example, if you deposit $15, MyBookie is going to give you $15 worth of bonus bets. There's no better time to use those than on MyBookie risk-free Thursdays, which I will be partaking in once again tonight. We have the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Washington Commanders on Thursday Night Football. The Washington Commanders rank in the bottom 4 in the NFL of rushing yards allowed. And the Eagles have Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, one of the best quarterback-running back duos for rushing yards in the NFL. So be sure to check out some of those game lines. We have a fire lineup of college football this week. Like we were just talking about, LSU's taking on Florida. Notre Dame's taking on Virginia. Tennessee's taking on Georgia. You got the powerhouse Penn State Nittany Lions traveling to West Lafayette to take on Purdue. So there's going to be a lot of good football on. And, of course, there's going to be a full slate of football on Sundays. And there's no better way to watch that than with MyBookie. So be sure to check out MyBookie, enroll in their loyalty rewards program, which rewards you with extra cash and bonuses just for submitting bets. They're the sports book that gives you control and rewards you for every moment of play.
Florida and Purdue for the upsets this weekend.
That would be so phenomenal. That would be so great. That would be so great. I mean, I don't know that I've ever gone as hard on a team after a playoff ranking than I have Penn State this week, Trevor. I mean, I remember we did the live show Tuesday night, and you and I talked, and I was like, look, we're not going to redo the Penn State stuff. And then, of course, as soon as Penn State gets brought up, I'm just like, rah! It's like I'm like Bruce Banner from Avengers, like now's a good time for you to get angry. And like, don't worry, when I'm talking about Penn State, I'm always angry. So like, that's just take a whole lot to get me going. Had another talk about it last night on another show, but this week, guys, we got to make sure, or not we got to make sure, but Notre Dame's got to make sure that they're not that team on the end of the upset. And when you're playing a Virginia team, Trev, you and I broke it down on Tuesday. This is a scrappy football team. This is a well-coached football team, and this is a football team that has played very hard the last 2 years, guys. I mean, I've never seen a team in a blowout be the more physical team in the fourth quarter, and I've seen that 2 or 3 times from Virginia the last 2 years. They just don't quit. And they're going to come into the stadium 3-1 on the road. They just earned a win over a ranked opponent on the road. They're not going to be as afraid of Notre Dame as maybe Notre Dame fans wish and think that they were. So this football team's going to have to come out and play well. And because that's where we're at, guys. I mean, Notre Dame can't just go out and win games by a touchdown the next 3 weeks. They have to play well in order to, I don't think they have to do that to make the playoff. I think they're in if they win out. But if they don't really hammer at least 2 of their next 3 opponents, I do think they could lose the potential to host a playoff game unless there's a lot of upsets. So Notre Dame has to handle some business. And I had a friend of mine tell me last night, he said in some ways he wonders if that early season loss was the best thing for Marcus Freeman because it forced Marcus Freeman to unleash this football team and say, look, we just can't go out and win. We got to go out there and destroy people. You know what I mean? Because what were we complaining about like late September? Him coming in before the game, we just got to be methodical. We just got to not, take what they – and now you look at his team, and it's like they're up, 38-3 in the backups, and Stephen Jelly's throwing bombs. You know what I mean? It's just like it's a different mentality, and it's resulted in this team really just destroying their last 7 opponents for the most part. So can they keep that going for game number 8? Can Marcus Freeman extend the longest winning streak of his career? We're going to talk about that today, guys. And I think it starts every week. It's the same story. The defense kind of has just done what they've done all year. That's just who they're going to be. We'll get to them. This success is going to be driven by what happens on the offensive side of the ball. A tight win, the defense is going to, I feel, the defense is just going to do what they're going to do no matter what. Whether it's a blowout win or a hard-fought win or worse is going to be determined by how the offense plays. And can they keep building on their recent success? And so we're going to start our keys to victory, fellas, on that side of the ball. And we will focus on the offense. And we all know we're going to go first. And I think it's always important for Notre Dame. This week, the importance is really twofold, Trev. Number one, it's the same that we always talk about, right? Come out. This offense does a lot better when they get into an early rhythm. They just do. They are a rhythm-based offense. They can get in funks, but when they come out and start well, they tend to play well. That then leads to your confidence growing. Your confidence growing leads to momentum being gained. Momentum being gained leads to Virginia realizing they have no chance. The second part, Trev, is going to lead into the rest of our keys to victory, which is you are the faster football team. Use it right away and overwhelm Virginia from the beginning. And that's what a fast start this time means more than just scoring a lot early. It means literally start fast.
Yeah, Notre Dame skilled positions out-athlete the skilled positions on Virginia's defense, with the most competitive matchup being Jonas Sanker. Jonas Sanker in the Virginia secondary is a dude. He's a really good football player. He can make plays at all 3 levels. Like we talked about on Tuesday, it's no secret that their safety leads the team in tackles for a loss and tackles. So, and I think last year he had, 5-6 interceptions to go along with it. So Jonas Sanker is a really good player, but what Notre Dame has advantage of, and you brought it up, is speed at every position. And I'm really hoping to see Mike Denbrock open up this offense similar to what he's done in the last 4 games and just get his playmakers in space. Run some deep crossers, run some crossing routes, run some deep overs, and just let your guys go be playmakers. Not necessarily get the ball in the hands of your playmakers in just running tunnel screens all day. I think they could have success there. I mean, we saw it against Florida State. Jaden Greathouse took a tunnel screen that didn't look like it had a whole lot there for 15, 20 yards. So, I want to see Notre Dame utilize that advantage that they have. And I know we're going to talk about it in all the different keys, but not just schematically, but being able to push the tempo and post-snap switches, things like that. Just utilize the advantage that you have.
Ryan, you talk a lot about this aspect being a momentum builder. And I think that's very true in this game.
It is. I mean, because I think it comes back to what you were talking about. It's not that Notre Dame's going to get to the playoff, and it's not even really about where the seed is. Like, the seed matters, obviously. Like, you want a home playoff game, and you want to obviously have the best route to potentially winning a national championship. But like, more than anything, you want to be able to see the best version of this Notre Dame team to believe that they can win a national championship. Like, that's the thing that matters most. And this is kind of a launch off point for me in this game, because when I look at this Virginia defense just in its entirety, there's really no one spot. Like, you mentioned Jonas Sanker. Like, Jonas Sanker is a good player, right? Like, Cam Robinson, although he's been banged up this year, is a good player on the second level. But like, there's no parts, like overall part of this defense that worries me in this game, really. I mean, this is one of the worst pass defenses in college football. This is a run defense that's okay, but nothing special. I mean, like, there is just nothing about this team that really gives me an overly cautious a skeptical outlook of this game. The only thing that could cause a skeptical outlook of this game is Notre Dame comes out flat offensively for whatever reason. But if they come out flat offensively, I think that's because of Notre Dame. I don't think it's because of Virginia. Like, I don't think Virginia is going to scheme all this exotic stuff and be like this incredible defense on Saturday. If Notre Dame isn't able to move the ball and comes out flat against this team, I think it's just the mental part of this game, right? Like, you just come off of a big win against a bigger brand in Florida State, even though they're a bad team. It's senior day, like all those types of things mixing together. If Notre Dame comes out strong and fast offensively, this shouldn't be much of a battle, but it's really, I think the mental side is what needs to be locked in when you start this game.
That leads perfectly, Ryan, to point number 2, because here's what concerns me about Virginia. They're very old on the edge and up front and strong. They're not very athletic, but they're physical. And if you come out and play a slow, static game, you're playing right into their hands, right? Like, they're 2 linebackers. You talked about Cam Robinson. I like that kid. The Jackson kid's a smart, tough player. He's just kind of slow. He's just not a real athletic kid. And you talk about their interior tackles, Trev. You and I broke down on Tuesday. Real big kids, but they're not like the Jackson and Farmer kids from Florida State. They're not like Zeke Biggers, where they're big and strong, but they're also kind of, NFL caliber athletes, to some degree. They're just kind of big and strong. And if you play a real static game, you're fitting right in a slow static game, going 12 personnel and things like that. I would be a lot more worried about this game if we were playing them, if we were watching them play with last year's personnel focus, which is just 12 personnel all day. So what that leads to, and what Ryan's point leads to, is my number 2 key to victory, or our number 2 key to victory, Ryan, is you can manipulate as a coach that fast start by literally coming out and playing fast. And I have really felt like when Notre Dame has let Riley Leonard work quickly early in games, he gets into a really nice early rhythm. And so pushing the tempo is my key to my second key. And these are all going to build perfectly together, in my opinion. Pushing the tempo does a couple things. Number one, it helps you get into that early rhythm, which we talked about. It helps you take advantage of their lack of athleticism, which you guys both talked about. It gets them on their heels, which then takes away the one thing I think they're good at, which is being physical and coming forward, right? And it allows you to get into that early rhythm. And you make this a game. We're going to make this a track meet. I don't mean track meet from the standpoint of they're going to all of a sudden look like 2011 Oregon or 2010 Oregon under Chip Kelly, right? I mean track meet, meaning we are going to play fast. We're going to play vertical. We're going to come at you, and we're going to come at you with speed. And so that to me is something I believe would be a very important piece to Notre Dame coming out early in this game and having success. Because I think you want to put this team away early. I do. I think it's very smart to put this team away early. And I want to limit as many reps as possible for my defense when I'm talking about having to go play a very physical Army triple option team next week. Very different style than what Navy played. Very different size up front than what Navy had. I want to put this game away, and that's not up to the defense. That's up to the offense. And so I want to see this team come out and push the tempo. And then what that leads to, guys, is kind of key number 3. And this is a big part of it. And Trev, you talked about this. You literally have an athleticism advantage everywhere. I am super high on Jonas Sanker, but what is Jonas Sanker's game? It's coming downhill. It's playing physical football. It's getting in the box. He's made 47 solo tackles. He's got like 7.5 tackles for loss. It's not cover in space, cover vertically. And so to me, make this a space game. North Carolina did that better than any team that's played Virginia so far this year. And Clemson did a pretty good job of this as well, which they basically just said they ran tunnel screens, they ran quick game, they moved the quarterback, they spread them out. They did a lot of things where they just 5 guys attached, and Marion Hampton and Virginia would have to space out, and they would just gash them with quick game, gash them with run game. They'd have those 4 guys rush because they're not super athletic guys. So if they leave a run lane going, Riley Leonard's going to attack it. You need to make this a game that's about we're going to play athlete versus athlete and see how that goes for you. So making it a space game formationally, making it a space game with your play calling, which means, obviously you're going to do your horizontal stretches because that's what they do, but get guys running, get guys chasing, which we saw a lot last week. There was actually a couple over routes that I thought Riley Leonard should have hit that could have gone for big plays where he forced the ball down the field. If he takes Jaden Harrison on an over route, he's catching and running. And then, of course, we've seen them do things at times where you get Jeremiah Love, out in the perimeter. I thought he should have hit him for a wide fade last week too, or slot fade last week for a big play. Do those now screens to Jeremiah Love. Get Jadarian Price in space like you did against A&M and Purdue and last week. Make this a space game, guys, because if this becomes athlete versus athlete, that's how Notre Dame absolutely dominates in this football game. If they want to say, hey, we're going to play some slobber knocker football, you're playing right into Virginia's hands. You're still going to win, in my opinion, but you're playing right into their hands. That's what they can do. It's tight area, tight quarters. I'll say this, Ryan. This would have been a really good Virginia defense 15 years ago. Like when the game was about running the football and being big and physical, this would have been a much better ACC defense 15 years ago. Today, it's one you've got to take advantage of with your speed.
I like that you mentioned formationally because that's actually something I was going to talk about anyway. Like, I don't think that this is a team that you are just going to line up in 12, 13 personnel and just bully them for days. Like, and I think that is the worst possible decision if you are Coach Denbrock and this offensive staff, because you already mentioned him. Jonas Sanker is their best football player and is their best tackler, right? So, like, I do not want to have a heavy personnel where I'm automatically inviting him down into the box. Like, I want him to be late to the box. Like, I don't want him to be just understand exactly where it's going to go. I want to see you the ability to work more. I want to see this offense line up and do some 11, 12, 11, 10 personnel. I want to see no tight end at times. I want to see them really test this team out in space. I think someone in the chat said something about RPOs. Like, we have seen a couple of games where RPOs were like the big indicator early in games, and I would love to see this be an RPO game because I just don't think that this is a team that is going to match up well if you get the ball out quick. I would like to see a little bit movement stuff with Riley Leonard in and out of the pocket. I would like to see a lot of this stuff because, again, this is not a good pass defense. It's not. It's allowing over 220 yards per game, and it's only also had 14 sacks on the quarterback all season. And we know that Riley Leonard is an incredibly hard person to sack. Like, he is just not an easy player to work into the pocket. So spread it out, let Riley Leonard get this game working. And then I think that as the game kind of wears on and you have to have lighter boxes, then I think that that's when Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, one of those guys breaks off 1 or 2 big runs where that's when the game kind of gets out of hand a little bit. But I do think that this is I just wrote about this. I think this is a heavy Riley Leonard game early in this game. Like, I do. I think that if you are going to put the onus on him to help loosen everything up, get the ball out fast, make good decisions, be accurate on time, utilize the RPO game, let him run a little bit, and then in the late first, second, and then as you get deeper into the football game, that's when Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price take over the football game a little bit. So I think that that is the fast start accompanied with the space game that you're talking about. I think Riley Leonard is your biggest weapon to start this game off this week.
Trev, Ryan talked about, this isn't a 12 and 13 personnel game, and I agree. I hinted about that earlier. That's why I would not have liked to have played this team as much. But one thing that I think Mike Denbrock has done really well this year at times that I could see him doing in this game, and I'm going to kick it to you, Trev, and Ryan, if you have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear it. But there's been a couple games this year against similar teams where he has gone 12 personnel and actually thrown the ball more. out of those looks, which we never saw in the past, where it's almost like, hey, I know you're big, I know you're slow. We're going to get you into your 12 personnel defense, and then we're going to move Mitchell Evans outside or Eli Raritan outside, and we're going to attack you throwing the football. I could see maybe something like that where you get Virginia thinking, hey, base defense time, let's get everybody down in the box, and you run some sort of wheel route, some sort of seam route, something like that. But that also fits into what we're talking about, though. Make this a space game, because Mitchell Evans and Eli Raritan are better athletes than their linebackers and safeties as well. But it all fits into the same mold of, if you're going to go play, with your big boy personnel, use that to your advantage. Get them thinking, okay, now they're playing into our wheelhouse, and then take advantage of take some shots. I mean, it all comes down to being aggressive and getting your athletes in space. And sometimes the athletes in space is 88 versus, the Jackson kid at linebacker, or Cam Robinson, or Jonas Sanker on a play action where, Ryan, to your point, you get him sucked down. So if he is a guy that wants to come downhill, then do things to take advantage of that, right? Don't just come out in 12 personnel and say, okay, we're going to play power football, which is what Ryan's pointing to. If you're going to do that, use that against them. It's almost kind of like reverse engineering things a little bit. But whatever the case may be, you make it about your athletes against their athletes, Trevor. And that includes running backs. I mean, did you guys see how North Carolina used Amorian Hampton in the pass game against the UVA linebackers? I love Amorian Hampton, but Jeremiah Love can do that. Jadarian Price can do that. It's also about the tight ends. It's about using all your personnel, not just, okay, Bo Collins, okay, Jaden Greathouse, okay, Jaden Harrison and Chris Mitchell, you guys got to carry us today. It's also about using those guys. Absolutely. On top of, as Ryan was saying, Trev, having Riley Leonard be a part of it. But I could see this also being a game where maybe your tight ends are a big part of maybe some of that vertical passing game. Like we saw a little bit last year, like Wake Forest, for example, a couple deep shots to Eli Raritan. They tried to do that against Florida State, and Riley didn't throw it. Eli was open on the corner route, and Riley didn't throw it. But maybe this is the game where you start to see a little bit of that. Or is that just me wishful thinking because I really want to see the tight ends become more impactful down the stretch? Maybe that's it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the wishful thinking at all. I mean, I agree. I like when Notre Dame passes out of 12 personnel because it's a tendency breaker. It's no secret that Notre Dame's identity is run the football first. And Notre Dame has shown that in games like this where they've had gone up against bigger interiors, is they do still sometimes try to just run into the teeth of the defense and rely on Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price breaking one open, which is something that I would like to see the tendency kind of go away. One thing that I was thinking about too is I think you're going to see a lot of play action early. With how downhill and aggressive this defense is, I could see something out of pistol a lot. I really could get Riley's back turned to the defense for a second and just rely on your athletes to go out in space and hit Mitchell Evans in the seam, right? Look for Jaden Greathouse on a deep over, So I think those are two things that you could see relatively early into the game, and just rely on Virginia keying in on that tendency of, Notre Dame's going to run the football. We're going to come downhill. Jonas Sanker loves to play downhill. Your linebackers or box linebackers are very comfortable playing within, they call it the hashes, and come downhill and stop the run. So I think that's something that you could see early too.
Hopefully, son of a biscuit. Perfectly into point number 4, Ryan. Go ahead. Take it.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, hopefully, I was actually going to make a joke. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Stay aggressive for a second. I was just going to say, hopefully, they're not in man coverage or we can't run play action. Oh, Jared Parker's not there anymore. I'm sorry.
Why you got to get petty with my guy, Jared Parker?
I'm sorry.
Why you got to go there? Why you got to go there? Well, the segue was, and that would lead to it as well. But the segue is, Trev, it's take your shots. I mean, Ryan's talked a lot about it. You talked a lot about it. What are the two things that you guys have focused on in today's show? Number one, Notre Dame's the more athletic team, right? Notre Dame's more athletic team. Number two, Virginia's a real aggressive team, right? Get them in space, do all these type of things. Well, what is that all geared towards? Ryan talked about them being a really bad pass defense. I mean, if you guys, we love doing data here. This is a team that gave up 403 yards to Wake Forest, 302 yards to Coastal Carolina, 263 to Maryland. Their quarterback's not very good. 254 to Boston College. I mean, Thomas Castellanos had his probably best passing game of his career against Virginia in that game. So, he completed 73% of his passes and 254 yards in that game. Gave up 345 to Clemson and then 293 to North Carolina. Ironically, you could argue their best pass defensive game of the season was against Louisville, who was coming off of back-to-back losses to Notre Dame and SMU. I think they were just a little bit shook at that point in time. But, it really, but that's what it comes down to, guys, right? Your dudes are better than their dudes. So what do we talk about? Come out, start fast, have that aggressive mindset that we've seen a lot of lately, right? Push the tempo, get them on their heels. Don't just come out and play. Let's play big boy smash mouth football. Make it a space game with everything you do. And what's the ultimate goal of all of that? Ryan, you kind of talked about it. Trevor, you talked about it, hinted about it. It's this. It's make the big plays, but not just the big plays that come from Jadarian Gashinum, Jeremiah Gashinum, which this is what this offense is great at. But it's like I said last week, Trevor, it's a little bit of like 0.4 from last week. Go big game hunting, right? Take your shots, get your matchups on the perimeter, and look for ways to be aggressive throwing the ball down the field. That's our final key, is take your shots, right? Sometimes it's a trick play. Sometimes it's just, we got cover one, and that safety is going to come downhill. Chris Mitchell, it's time for you to do your thing, or Bo Collins, or Jaden Greathouse, or Jaden Harrison, whoever, Mitchell Evans, whoever. Take your shots. That's going to be the other thing in different ways. Not just go balls all the time, but find ways to take your shots, because this is also a defense that is very vulnerable to giving up big plays, especially against teams that have some athleticism. And that's exactly what Notre Dame has on all phases of the game. Just to point out, Virginia this year, guys, as Trev, you and I talked about, 116th in the country in most plays of 30 yards or more allowed on defense. Notre Dame has been one of the best big play offenses in the country this year running the football. One of the final missing ingredients to me of this team, fellas, is kind of taking that final step, is becoming more of a team that can also rip off big plays in the pass game. That, to me, is sort of that final missing piece, and this is the perfect team to kind of take advantage of that against. You saw a little glimpses of it last week. We saw some of it against Navy. We saw a little bit of it against Stanford. Now, just keep building on that and be willing to take your shots. Do that. Do all these things. And not only do I think Notre Dame wins, fellas, this isn't just keys to victory. This is keys to a dominant victory, in my opinion.
I think it needs to be a nice passing game just in general, because, we talked about the pass defense isn't good, and I think that you were correct. Notre Dame should be able to make a bunch of explosives potentially in the passing game. I would also say this is that there really hasn't been a game this year where you're just come out and like, wow, all the wide receivers did some good stuff today. It's usually like one or two, right? Like last week, it was like, wow, Jaden Greathouse had maybe his best game of the season. That's awesome. The week before, even with the drop, it was like, oh, Jordan Faison was the guy, right? Like, is he going to be the go-to guy going forward? We've had a couple Bo Collins games. Like, it would be great if we just had a game here going down the stretch in a very manageable 3-game stretch where you're going into hopefully a deep playoff run here, where all the dots start getting connected a little bit from a passing game perspective. We see a couple big plays for Bo Collins. We see Jaden Greathouse get down the seam for a big ball like he did against Navy. We see Jordan Faison make a big play. I would just love to see an entire performance from this passing attack. I don't want to see one or two guys. Mitchell Evans, you would just had your best game of the season, even with that catch called back. Can you continue to build on this? I want this team to be able to make some explosive plays, but more than anything, I want them to be able to be a cohesive unit, maybe for the first time this year.
That's where the big plays are going to come from, especially against the better teams, guys. Like this is what I'm talking about right here, right? To your point, Ryan. Notre Dame this season ranks 10th in college football in most rushing plays of 30 yards or more. They rank 10th. They're doing that with an offense. They rank 8th in most plays of 50 yards or 40 yards or more. They rank 7th in plays of 50 yards or more, right? Get the hint, 6th in 60 yards or more. And they're doing that with a pass game that ranks 119th in most gains of 30 yards or more. If you start adding a little bit more of that element to this, how do you defend this offense as you get ready to go into the postseason? And so that's why I do think that this is something important. And we've seen more and more of it in recent weeks. They had multiple 20-yard gains last week against Florida State on different ways. To your point, Brian, it was like that's where we saw a little bit of a glimpse of that. For the first time, you had Jaden Greathouse made a big play. Jaden Harrison had 2 20-plus yard gains. I thought Mitchell Evans should have had another one. He had the touchdown gain. You started to see like, okay, this isn't just a Bo Collins game. This isn't just a Jordan Faison game like it was against Navy, where it's like, okay, it's just okay. We're trying to see a concerted effort to get Jordan Faison the ball. He would have had another 20-yard gain if he didn't drop the freaking ball. But he did then go in and converted a 4th and 10. So the spreading, there's lots of guys you have that are capable of making those type of plays in different ways. It's time to hit those, because if this offense becomes a legitimate, hey, if you're going to play man coverage against us, we can take advantage of it. You're going to have some success. And look, you guys both watched the film. Early in the game, I wasn't loving the separation they were getting against Florida State, but by the second quarter, I mean, there was like 5-6 yards between guys on certain routes, and they just it didn't click with the quarterback per se. He had a couple of them later, but you started to see finally, hey, they're starting to get a little bit of that when they did it against Navy as well. They got to carry it into this game, because their corners, like Ryan, I said this on Tuesday. The corner they have, I can't remember his last name, the 6'2" kid, looks identical to the Thomas kid from Florida State, except he's just not fast or athletic like that kid is, right? You know what I mean? Like, take advantage of that. Go after him like every other team.
He's the Twins version. He's Danny DeVito. That's who he is.
Right. So take advantage of that, guys, is really the big thing. So take your shots. Anything else you guys want to add about the offense before we move over to the defense?
Overall, I just want to see a clean game. I feel like with the passing game, it was almost there, but Bo Collins had a drop and a fumble. It was almost there, but Riley Leonard sailed a couple passes. It was almost there, but I just want to see a clean game executed to its highest. That's what I want to see.
No more drop passes, man. There were way too many drop passes last week, and then obviously Jordan Faison had one or two the game before that as well. So hold on to the ball, clean stuff. Notre Dame has been a very good team for the most part of not turning the football over, which is great. But let's now combine that with not dropping the football and just being a clean operational team. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fellas, we're going to go to the defense next, guys, but do us all a favor, everybody. Before we do that, there's a little button down there that has a thumbs up on it. Hit that like button for us. It helps our channel. It takes you like 3 seconds to do, especially if you're on a phone. It's even easier to do on your phone. You just got to kind of go like this, click it. If you're on a computer, you just grab your mouse real quick, boom, hit that like button. We would greatly appreciate that. And it, of course, helps us continue to grow our channel and build what we're trying to do here at Irish Breakdown. So, guys, let's dive into the defensive keys. And like in a lot of ways, I'm at the point now, fellas, where I just kind of and I don't. I don't even know if you guys have ever experienced this, because you're both a lot younger than I am. But this is the first time really since like Lou Holtz was coaching and I was a teenager that I just assume going into every game that the defense is just going to dominate their opponent. And I don't even think about it. I mean, like that maybe 2012, but even then it was like you could tell they weren't playing very good offenses. I was very nervous going into the Oklahoma game. I'm not even going to lie to you. Where like now I'm just like, all right, I expect them to hold this team under 14 points in some capacity. Can the offense score more than 14? So in a lot of ways, guys, it's kind of just keep doing what you're doing, right? With maybe Trevor, one little exception.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm in the same boat as you. What more can you ask from this defense? You know what I mean? They've held their last 3 opponents to an average of 9.3 points per game. My biggest takeaway with them is it almost mirrors the offense. Is start fast. You go back and you look at some of the games that Notre Dame has played over recent weeks. I mean, last week they gave up a 16-play, 75-yard drive to Florida State to open it up. On Navy's first drive of the game where they didn't turn the ball over, it was 5 plays, 80 yards. That was ignited by that big run by Blake Horvath. Against Georgia Tech on their second drive, they went for a 13-play, 71-yard touchdown drive. So all in all, we're talking about performances where they held good offenses to very minimal, outside of Florida State's, very minimal points. But again, Virginia to me is a gritty enough team that if you give them just a glimmer of hope of, hey, we can kind of hang around with the best defense in the country, that's enough to give them enough momentum to potentially hang around a little bit longer than what they should. So I think start fast is also a good key to victory for this Notre Dame defense as well.
Because you look at the schedule, guys, Florida State scored on their first possession. Navy was actually driving before their turnover on their first possession. Georgia Tech scored on their second possession and led 7-0 at the end of the first quarter. Stanford scored on their first possession. Louisville scored on their first possession. And Notre Dame had to force a turnover. Well, actually, they forced a punt from Miami, and then an interception led to them kind of having a chance to score. Fortunately, the defense was able to hold there. And you let Texas A&M go down and score on their first drive, and you let Northern Illinois score on their first drive, 98-yard drive. There's been a lot of games this year. If you want to find a flaw of the defense, and we have to kind of look hard to find one, it's they kind of bear a little slow out of the gate. And then once they figure it out, you may not get a first down or move past midfield. You know what I mean? But like that slow start, if the offense does come out blazing, then you need to do your part to do that. And Ryan, to me, there's one giant key to completely shutting down this Virginia offense, and that is you got to get after Calandria. He's a 6-foot quarterback that's a pretty good athlete, that when he gets into a rhythm, he's a good football player. But if you get him out of rhythm, you can have a lot of success against this offense.
As the kids would say, Anthony Calandria is a very fun college quarterback because he's chaos in a bottle, dude. Like his best stuff is really good. Like it really is. Like he can move well in and outside of the pocket a little bit. He's got a pretty strong arm despite only being 6 foot, but like
$185. Yeah, he can spin it.
He holds the ball way too long a lot of the times, which I like. I know this offensive line has given up 30 sacks this year, which like I don't think it's a great offensive line by any stretch, but like there are a lot of those sacks where I'm just kind of like, I just think he held the ball like way too long. Like there's just been a lot of that this year because he's got a little bit of that hero ball to him, right? Like he wants to hold the ball, he wants to create big plays. It's a double-edged sword, though. I mean, it's like we've seen a lot of guys in the history of the NFL, right? Like Josh Allen, Brett Favre, like those types of dudes where it's like their greatest weapon is also their biggest weakness, right?
John Elway was that
fall
way.
into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They fall into, I can make a lot of big plays, and sometimes I get careless with the football, which is the reason that he has had 8 interceptions, 4 fumbles, and he's been sacked 30 times, right? Like he is a very volatile quarterback. But if he gets into a rhythm where he's feeling himself and he thinks that he can be Superman, that's when he is super, super dangerous. So yeah,
you saw that against Louisville, Ryan, when his legs were a big reason they started coming back in that football game, right? I mean, but here's why this is so important too, Ryan. And I'll add, everything you said is correct, but I'll add to this. They need him to do that. They're not good enough on offense to succeed without him being that way. He has to play that way. And that's why rattling him early is huge. A big part of this game, because they're not good. They're not good enough to just come out and like they may have a drive or two like Florida State did where they get a couple runs and maybe they push Notre Dame off the ball a little bit, but they're not going to be able to come out here and just run the ball all over Notre Dame. This Notre Dame run defense is not as good as I would like it to be, but it's way better than what it was last year. You know what I mean? Where they would give up. I mean, they had 1, 2, 3, 3 games of over 175 yards, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games of over 120 yards that they gave up rushing. This year they've had 3 of those, right? You had the Northern Illinois game, and then but Navy, you count Navy as one, but let's be honest, holding Navy 222 yards is a huge victory. And then your next 2 highest outcome, you had 146 against Texas A&M, which only 3.8 per carry. You held Louisville to 131, 3.7 per carry. You shut down Stanford's run game. You shut down Georgia Tech's run game, which, by the way, for Notre Dame fans who have not watched Georgia Tech play this year outside of the Notre Dame game, that was a brilliant defensive performance because that is a really good rushing team. Just go ask Miami what kind of rushing team that is. Ask North Carolina the week before they played Notre Dame what kind of rushing team that is. They can't do that, right? And as much as we love Malachi Fields, and we're going to talk about him later, I know Trev's going to talk about him, it's not enough for them to just go up and down the field playing base offense. They need this kid to be sort of their Superman, their Riley Leonard, essentially, because they're not good enough without it. So if you take that away and you get him working backwards or him rushing his throws, or the other thing too is you get quick pressures and you get your hands up and you get 6'5" Riley Mills gets his hands up and 6'5" Gabriel Rubio gets his hands up and Josh Burnham, who's 6'4" with super long arms, and RJ Oben 6'4" with super long arms. That kid's 6 feet tall, maybe. I was actually going to ask you, Ryan, about
he's not 6 foot.
That's what I was going to ask you because I know you got some official measure. Hey, he's 6 foot maybe with cleats on, right? So those are the things: is disrupt him, get that pressure, get into the backfield, get him out of rhythm. If he gets out, if you don't let him get going early, this game could get over real fast, fellas, real fast. And Trev, part of that to me, their tackles are not good. They're not good. You have to dominate the edge of the line. Now, I don't know which tackle is going to start, but they both stink. They've both given up multiple, like they're over 10 pressures. Both of the guys that have played left tackle this year have given up 4 sacks each, according to Pro Football Focus. They remind me a lot of the Louisville tackles, but not as good. Meaning like they're stiff, they're tall, they dominate the edge. You shut down their run game and funnel everything inside. You dominate the edge. You get after Calandria. You dominate on the edge. You also make sure he doesn't get out of the pocket. I think Josh Burnham and RJ Oben and Bryce Young and Junior Telemaka are going to be huge keys to absolutely shutting down. We talk a lot about the tackles. Obviously you won't have Howard Cross this week, and Riley Mills has been on fire and Donovan High. But to me, this is a game where I'm going to be keying on those 4 guys on the edge to see what they do to really shut down this Virginia offense.
Yeah, I agree. This game almost kind of screams like a Bryce Young welcome to college football moment type of game. I really believe so, because athletically, especially once you factor in his size, I think he's the most athletic defensive end that Notre Dame has that's healthy right now. I do. So, you talk about the height difference.
That could be true if he's healthy.
Fair enough. I was going to say like Bubakar could probably compete with them, but still, you go and you talk about the height difference with Calandria. This feels like a game where Bryce Young's going to get a handful of pressures, maybe rip off 1 or 2 sacks, get a couple of tip passes in there. One of them might be picked off. So, I think the edge rushers really need to dominate in this game, because like I talked about last week, Notre Dame hasn't really faced more of a traditional offense, and Riley Mills just played like, a man possessed last week. And honestly, didn't really give anybody else a chance to get after the quarterback a little bit, which I will not be upset if that happens again this week. I won't. But at some point, the edge rushers for Notre Dame are going to have to come alive. And we've seen spurts, right? We've seen little moments from Josh Burnham and little moments from Junior Tuialamaka and little moments from Bryce Young. Some on and off here from RJ Oben. Got to finish the play, but we've seen him get after people in the backfield. This has to be a game where Notre Dame exposes the right and left tackles for Virginia, because they're going to need that moving forward. They really are. I'm with you.
Ryan, here's another thing too. Calandria is a key. And here's the other thing: as I watch film, I watched the Carolina game, I watched the Louisville game. Here's the one thing that concerns me. Xavier Brown is the one guy that concerns me offensively. He's the one potential big play guy they have that's been banged up. But especially, here's where it's unique to Notre Dame. They have shown a willingness to get him out of the backfield with some wheels and some swings and some things like that. They hit a touchdown pass against, I think it was a touchdown pass against North Carolina, a little shorter one, a little quick wheel. He obviously had the long touchdown catch and run against Louisville that really sparked their offense in that game. And he's the one guy that you look at and say, okay, that guy has some juice in that offense. And he looks like he's getting healthier after missing last year. And Notre Dame has been vulnerable to backs out of the backfield this season at times, especially with motions, but also with just free releases. Because what you can't do is you can't allow this team to kind of rip off some momentum-changing big plays. And there's really only 3 guys in their offense that have the athletic ability or talent to do that. It's Calandria, Malachi Fields, and Xavier Brown. And so they are going to they're going to design some stuff, Ryan, to try to get him the ball against Notre Dame's linebackers in hopes that, hey, if we catch them on a blitz, his sucker could go for a big play, especially after watching Florida State out-leverage Notre Dame's defense as often as they did last week with those little quick pitches to their running backs.
Man, the Chris Tyree disrespect. I thought you Virginia guys had to stick together, man. It's crazy.
Well, they don't give him the ball. They don't give him the ball.
He's been bagged up too, apparently. But yeah. I think that for me, like, this is an offense that it's going to live and die by the big play at times as well. Because I agree. I don't think they have a lot of big play players, which is why one game their offense looks pretty good, and then the next game it doesn't look overly good. That's why it's a volatile thing. It's not just Anthony Calandria. It's the fact that I don't think they have a ton of speed. Like even Malachi Fields, number 8, listed at 6'4", really good outside boundary receiver. I mean, he's got 40-something catches, over 600 yards this year. He's having a really good year for Virginia. He's not a speed guy. Like I'm going to out-leverage you with my length and my catch radius. Like that's how he's going to win down the field. So if you're Leonard Moore, you're going to get him a lot in the boundary this week. Like that's going to be the matchup where, and I think that Look, I think Leonard Moore has been really, really good for Notre Dame. But like at the end of the day, if I'm Tony Elliott and this offensive staff, I'm going to look around on the depth chart and say like, hey, they still do have a freshman playing into the boundary, right? Like that's a pretty tough task against our best player. So I think that they're going to take an opportunity to try to test him. And I think we'll know very early on. I think it's going to be the first couple of series. We're going to know very early on if Notre Dame's defense is going to have one of those type performances that they seemingly do every single week. Because if this is a team that can't create a big play on the first or second drive of this game, I think that they might go into a shell a little bit and be like, I don't know if this is going to work until probably in the second half where, they're in a little bit of garbage time where that stuff typically happens. But yeah, eliminate big plays because this is not an efficient running team at all. They are not an efficient short area passing game either. So if you force this team to be uncomfortable and not be able to create big plays, they're not going to be a sustainable offense.
And Trev, that's kind of why when I look at this game plan, why I focus, and you and I have talked about this off the air multiple times, and we talked a little bit about on Tuesday of the Xavier Brown aspect of it. Because to me, to Ryan's point, Malachi Fields might hit you for a couple back shoulders for 30 yards. He's not going to hit a bunch of 60, 70-yard game changers unless somebody falls down or you miss a tackle or something like that. And when you look at Virginia, I'm looking at the breakdown you did the other day, Trev, and they rank 81st in scoring, 60th in total offense, 86th in rushing offense, 72nd in yards per completion, 52nd in yards per attempt, 109th in third down, 98th in red zone, 54th in turnovers. But there's one stat that you look at and say, okay, that doesn't look like the other stats. And it's the one you and I discussed the other day. Virginia ranks 36th in college football in plays of 40 yards or more, which does not at all track with a team that is 80th in scoring and a team that's 60th in yards per game and 72nd in yards per play, which means there's a lot of nothing and then boom, big play. A lot of nothing and then boom, big play. And if you shut that down, they are going to have a tough time scoring. Forget the upset, just scoring, period. And it just adds to the importance of that. And I think the biggest weapon that they're going to have is their backside of the backfield. And you have to have a game plan for that, in my opinion. Have to have a game plan for that. And we'll see if Notre Dame does.
Yeah, I agree. They're going to do everything that they can to get the ball into the hands of Xavier Brown because he's not even listed as a starting running back. I think it's still Kobe Pace.
He is, yeah.
But Kobe Pace is more of just your between the tackles, downhill runner. Like he's not fast. He doesn't have that much big play ability. He kind of reminds me of one of those guys where, you need 4 yards, he'll get you 5. You need 10 yards, he'll get you 5. He's one of those guys. But Xavier Brown definitely adds that change of pace. He can catch well out of the backfield. But for Notre Dame, I think on defense, it comes down to eye discipline and staying disciplined because Virginia is not an offense that can methodically move the ball down the field. Mm-hmm. If you can eliminate plays of that the 25-yard chunk, a 30-yard chunk, an 11-yard chunk. Like if you can get rid of those, then I think Notre Dame's defense is going to be fine. Last little nugget that I'll add, against Pitt early on, they tried a lot of like random misdirection things. I mean, they had almost like a Philly special-esque type of, wide receiver pass to Calandria, who was wide open up the sideline. And then they did a similar play, but it was a reverse, like I think later on the same drive or on the following drive in the second quarter. So just one thing, it's when an inferior team like this comes into South Bend, they're looking to pull off the upset. They're going to throw a couple of those at you. It's just, all goes into being disciplined.
They're going to empty the clip, baby. They got nothing left at this point. So
just like Florida State did. Hopefully for Virginia's sake, they can do a little bit more than just that first series. But, kind of going through some of this, Trev, you mentioned that Kobe Pace is still their leading rusher, but it's by a small handful of yards, and he's got way more carries. It's by 6 yards, but he's got 32 more carries, right? But it's like just looking through their box score, guys, it's like comical because they don't score short touchdowns. Part of the reason they're not good in the red zone is because they can't get into the red zone. But I'm looking at like the Clemson game, 44-yard touchdown, 65-yard touchdown, 46-yard touchdown against Louisville, 68-yard touchdown against North Carolina. They had 2 field goals and then a 68-yard touchdown. That's been kind of their MO a lot this year. Xavier Brown had a 24-yard touchdown catch against Pitt last weekend, which gave UVA the lead. His 46-yard touchdown pass against Louisville gave them a 20-17 fourth quarter lead. Malachi Fields with a 44-yard touchdown, to help spark them in another game that gave them a lead. So that's the thing, is that's what they've had to feast on, because they're just not good enough to consistently move the football. I look at the Coastal Carolina game. Kobe Pace, 15 carries for 57 yards. Xavier Brown, 9 carries, 171 yards, right? I mean, it's that type of thing where they're just going to try to chunk you to death. Notre Dame's been pretty good at not – like, I actually felt early in the year Notre Dame was not good at that. Like, early in the year, remember, Trev, when we were doing a breakdown, one of the statistical breakdowns, and we were like, Notre Dame's like 5th, 8th, 12th, 9th, 6th, 2nd. And all of a sudden you get down to like most plays of 20 yards allowed or more, and they were like 69th or something like that, right? Well, lo and behold, now when you look at their defense, if you look at gains of 30 yards or more, they're 8th. If you look at gains of 20 yards or more, they're 10th. I think like game 3 or 4, I think it was going into the Louisville game actually, when they were like in the 50s or 60s in that, because they just have stopped giving that up. You keep that going against Virginia, guys, they have zero chance in this game, barring your own offense giving them 3 scoring possessions. That's really the only chance that they have. And it reminds me a lot of the Miami game, Ryan. You and I talked a very similar thing early on against Miami. Remember that? We talked about the slot receiver, and we talked about this against Northern Illinois too. We said with Ontario Brown and that slot receiver that Northern Illinois has, you said you can't let Rudolph, or is it Randolph?
Trayvon Rudolph, I think, or Rudolph.
So you can't let those guys get big plays. What's the only touchdown drive Northern Illinois had that entire game? It was an 80-something yard touchdown pass, right? I watched Northern Illinois last night against who'd they beat last night? Akron. And that's exactly where a lot of their big scores came from. It's just long plays, jet sweep here, run there. If you shut that down from this team, they do nothing on you. So it's going to be a key. Last piece, guys, is create pass game inefficiency for them. Don't let them get into an early rhythm throwing the football. They are a pretty good passing team. Just look at the number. Pretty decent passing team, I should say. Not good, but decent passing team. They rank 39th in college football in passing yards per game. They've had some really good performances, 357 against Wake Forest, 297 against Richmond, 301 against Louisville, 278 against Clemson, 281 against North Carolina. But here's the thing I noticed when I was looking through their statistics. Calandria, well, I should say the pass offense, I should say, I'm going to pull up Calandria specifically. He this season has had 5 games where he has completed 50% of his, less than 60% of his throws in 5 games. Their record in those 5 games where he's been sub 60% is 1-4. They're just not good enough to overcome 2nd and long, 3rd and long. Trevor, you had it in your breakdown. They rank 109th in 3rd down offense. It fits right in what we talked about. Their big plays are bust. And you got to make sure that they're inefficient in the pass game. Because if they get in the 3rd and long, guys, Notre Dame's not giving up very many big pass plays. That's just been their bread and butter all year. It's the 1st and 2nd down stuff. So if you can create some inefficiency in the pass game, this offense is going to struggle to do enough to win.
I mean, I think it always comes back to the Calandria kid again, right? Like, I think that he is still a young kid, only a true sophomore, where if we're a little bit if you run a little bit of some multiple coverages at times or roll to stuff post snap, like I think that stuff can really mess with him. And I think he's going to turn the football over, but I just think that he's a feast or famine kid right now. That's what he is, right? Like, he's not built off of rhythm in the sense of getting the ball out on time. He's built off of rhythm in terms of him thinking he can make big plays all the time. Like, that's the rhythm that he brings to the table. So if you confuse him, he's going to be erratic, and that from a not only general accuracy perspective, but he's going to make some erratic decisions as well. So that's going to come down to it. I mentioned it already: 8 interceptions, 4 fumbles, 30 sacks he's taken this year. This kid doesn't really understand how to get the ball out on time consistently. He's going to take some unreasonable chances, and I don't think he sees the field overly well right now because he's a young cat.
Trev, it kind of fits in also to what you talked about earlier, right? You talk about the big, tall, long guys. Part of creating an inefficient pass game is if the quarterback does start to feel panic and tries to get the ball out quick, you got all these trees knocking the ball down. That it all ties together, Trevor. And if this team struggles to get their pass game going on 1st and 2nd down, it's going to be a long day, very long day.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that Calandry has faced a defense that has this quite of like speed at all levels.
In fairness, most quarterbacks haven't.
Sure. No, absolutely. 100% they have not.
I saw some graph some guy put out from one of the models guys, and it was like a graph. Ryan, you've seen them, right? Trev, you've seen them where it's like the cross graph, and they like how you fit to here, and like it was based on and there was like Notre Dame all the way out here, like with no one near them, and it was some graph for pass defense, and you're like, no one's even close.
No.
To what Notre Dame hasn't been in pass defense this season. They've held 3 of their last 4 opponents to under 100 yards of passing, which is wild.
No,
wild.
It's insane. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of batted passes at the line of scrimmage. I really do. The length is just going to be something that's going to really, really hurt Virginia's offense as a whole. The speed is going to be something like they haven't seen this year. So, I mean, as long as the defense comes in and plays a fundamentally sound game, I think we're going to be talking very much of the same that we've seen over the last couple of weeks from them. I really do.
And it's a very long Notre Dame defense. So that's going to do it for that, guys. I want to get to the prediction. So, folks, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and we would love it if you gave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you are listening to our show. So, fellas, it's prediction time. You guys ready to make your predictions for this game? And as I said earlier, Ryan did not predict Notre Dame to win. That was me lying to you all. Ryan did not predict Notre Dame to lose this game. So he didn't get nearly enough hate in the chat. I was very disappointed in you guys that you saw through my ruse. But big game, guys. And it's not just a game where Notre Dame needs to win, Trev. It's a game where Notre Dame needs to dominate. And so we'll kick things off with you. Give your your score prediction. Tell us how you see the game playing out.
Yeah, my score prediction for this one's 42-6, Notre Dame. I think they just pick up where they left off. Notre Dame's hot right now. I mean, as a team, over their last 4 games, they're averaging 45.8 points per game. In 3 of those games, they've been closer, if not over, to scoring 50 than they have been to 40 as a team. So, and again, with their defense, like we just got done talking about, I think Virginia is going to have a really hard time moving the ball, especially if Notre Dame's defense comes out and starts fast like we hope that they do. But, Bryan, I was telling you before the show, I think this might be one of the best offensive performances Notre Dame has in the first half. We're talking about shades of the Purdue game. Maybe not playing out as much as they have been before, or not, hanging 42 points in the first half. I think Virginia's defense is a little bit better than Purdue's. But there are some of the same similarities and like how well they're able to move. Now, I think very similar to Purdue. They had a really good safety. That was kind of the best player on their defense. Virginia has a really good safety. That's the best player on their defense. So I see a lot of similarities there. But I think overall, you're just going to see a very clean and efficient game from Notre Dame. No turnovers, limited drops, if any. Yeah, I think Riley Leonard is pretty dialed on offense. I think he's hitting the throws that he needs to, because I think, the coaching staff knows that you have to focus on the opportunity at hand. They do also know what's on the back half of the burner for them in this 4-game stretch, and they do have a very physical game coming up. So you compound that with senior day, and you're going to want to get some of the guys in that don't necessarily get a lot of time. So I think Notre Dame's going to try to put this one away early. I think Virginia has a tough time getting the ball anywhere remotely close to the red zone in the first 2.5 quarters. I really do.
So give me your score again, Trev. You said 42-6?
42-6.
42-6. Okay. So if the game plays out the way that you think it will, give me your game balls for the Notre Dame offense.
Yeah, game ball on offense, I think, is going to go to Mitchell Evans. I think last game is real. Sometimes when you're an athlete like that, kind of using a basketball analogy here, sometimes you just have to see some go in. Sometimes you just have to see some go through the hoop, and I think that's what happened to Mitchell Evans last week. I do. Sometimes you need that performance that goes out and shows you. It's like, yo, I am still him. I am still that guy. I have that capability, and I think he's a matchup nightmare for this Virginia defense. So I think Mitchell Evans has his best game of the season from a yards and receptions standpoint. So he gets the offensive game ball for me.
Just to give you guys a heads up, Ryan's internet just went out. So I don't know that he's going to be able to come back because he's got to go pick up his daughter here pretty soon. But I'm going to ask him what his prediction was, and we'll get to this here real quick. So Mitchell Evans on offense, and you kind of mentioned it too. We were very hard on Mitchell Evans middle of the season because his attitude wasn't right. He wasn't playing fast. It wasn't just, oh, he's coming back from injury. There was clearly some sort of something there. And I don't know how it got fixed or whatever, but he has certainly played with a different demeanor, different attitude, different speed. And you can tell that Mike Denbrock is returning the favor by, okay, now you've given me reason to say, hey, listen, this is what we're going to game plan to get you the ball more. And I think that was a big one. Defensively, who gets your game ball?
I'm going to give it to Leonard Moore. I think this is going to be his first true big test. I think that Calandri is going to really try and force some things to Malachi Fields. You see Leonard Moore with his length matching up really well with how long Malachi Fields is and how well he plays in the boundary. I think he's going to be a difference maker in the secondary. I was going back and forth and if I wanted to give it to a defensive lineman again, because I think Leonard Moore has had opportunities to show how good he is in coverage. The quarterback just hasn't been able to get the football off, if I'm being 100% honest with you. So I could see more of the same, but this kind of feels like a Leonard Moore coming out party, similar to how I brought up Bryce Young earlier. But for game ball on defense, I'm going to go with the true freshman Leonard Moore.
I dig it. I just got a text. So Ryan's prediction for the game is 41-17. He has Florida State scoring a late touchdown against the Notre Dame backups, is what he said. So his game ball on offense, he says Riley Leonard has a big game, and his defensive game ball was the same as yours, Trevor. He said he went with Leonard Moore. So good pick by the two of you. What's the thing, Trev, that concerns you most about if Notre Dame doesn't win convincingly, doesn't cover the spread? What's the one or two things that you'd say you're most concerned about that could factor into that type of result?
Yeah, I'll break it down on offense and defense. On offense, I think it's just poor efficiency. I think Notre Dame kind of falls into what they've done historically this season is, they have a really good first quarter and then they're kind of non-existent for the next quarter and a half. And then they, turn it back on late in the third quarter to finish the game. Or it's something where they start slow, have a really good second and third quarter. And then, fourth quarter, it's kind of, all right, let's just get out of here with the win. Yeah. So I think offensive inefficiency is what could plague them from putting up the amount of points that they could.
Kind of like Georgia. I mean, it sounds a lot like Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds a lot like that game where they were clearly the better team. Clearly, we're not going to lose, but just didn't put them away. And that's what's looking back is even more frustrating about that game because now with them beating Miami, imagine if you could have put another touchdown or two on the board against that team and beat them the way you should have. I dig that one. I'm with you on that one.
Yep. And then on defense, we talked about it, but it's just chunk plays. They're not disciplined. They're not trusting their instincts. They're giving up backside wheels to Xavier Brown in the backfield. They're giving up backside reads to Calandria, in the running game. But outside of that, those would be the two things for me.
So here's my prediction for the game. I think this is going to be a continuance of what we've seen for the last 7 weeks. I mean, this isn't me saying, boy, I just feel really good about this game. It's just, look, this is what they've done for the last 7 weeks. They dominate inferior opponents, and Virginia's an inferior opponent. So, I think that they kind of continue that in this game. My prediction is 45-10. I'm actually asking Bill a quick question here real quick. See if he has a prediction for this game. But yeah, look, I'm with you guys. I do think that Notre Dame starts well in this game. We've seen they've been better and better about scoring early and those type of things. And we've seen more fast starts. Like obviously last week was not that, even though they did score in their opening drive, but then they were a little sluggish after that. I think they shake off the rust and look a lot more like they did in the second half, which is just you get the ball and you score. You get the ball and you score. And, I think they kind of run away with it. I do have it at 45-10. I do think the defense is going to give up an early touchdown like they pretty much have in a lot of games recently. And so I think that we'll see that, and then they'll get a field goal in the second half at some point in time. So I'm going with Bill, I'm going to bring you in here now and let you just quickly give that. Bill Bender joining us, everybody. Thanks, Bill. We're going to actually bring you into the Notre Dame show here for a minute, Bill. But that's how I see it, Trev. I see Notre Dame being able to hit big plays in the pass game. I think Riley has his best passing game of the season, and just no one's been able to move the ball and score in this Notre Dame defense. And I just don't see Virginia being the team where that all of a sudden happens. And so I'm going 45-10. My game ball on offense, I'm going with Riley Leonard. Like I just said, I think now the only exception would be is if you're Mitchell Evans, some receiver has a monster day as part of his big passing game, then I could see that kind of standing out. Defensively, I'm going Xavier Watts. I think Xavier Watts locks down his All-American honors this week. He should have it locked down already with the way he's played, but I think some of those sailed balls by a 6-foot quarterback throwing over a bunch of 6'5" guys is going to result in Xavier Watts being in a position for a couple picks. I could see a Clemson type of game from Benjamin Morrison a couple years ago, a Xavier Watts game against USC type game last year where they're just able to force a lot of turnovers. This is a kid that's turned the ball over 12 times in 9 games. And Notre Dame's one of the better turnover forcing defenses in college football. So I think Xavier Watts is going to get mine. So, Bill, we're bringing you on because you actually made a prediction for Notre Dame this week. So before you and I kick over to the national games, why don't you go ahead and give us your prediction for Notre Dame, Virginia, and tell us how you see this game playing out.
And Notre Dame, when they're favored by 20 or more, is tough. I mean, they're 2-2 against the spread this season doing it. So they're either going to come out and do what you guys were saying or they won't. And I got it at 42-17, right around the line. This is a defense that's been really good. The last 4 weeks, Notre Dame's played as good as anybody on that side of the ball and, continues to trudge on. Some would argue, well, they're beating up on ACC teams, but they're beating up on teams is the important thing to me. And I'll go Irish 42-17. They built some momentum, and Army's next week, right? Might have to come in a little earlier and give some thoughts on that. I bet Army hands the ball off next week. That's my thought.
Always welcome, Bill. You're always welcome into our show. Was the 2 games they did not cover the Northern Illinois and Miami games? Are those the 2 they didn't cover?
I'm guessing those are the 2.
I know Northern Illinois for sure was, and I thought Miami was as well. I thought Miami was like 26 or 27, and they were right at 25.
They were probably right under at that point. Yeah. So if you look at, I'm pulling it up real quick.
Because I know they covered the spread last week against Florida State.
They've covered 4 in a row, and they covered against Stanford and Florida State did not cover. Well, you guys, don't schedule my alma mater, Ohio University. Then we know you won't cover them. So
they never covered against MAC teams outside of Bowling Green. I think that's the only MAC team they've covered against in recent years. So there you go. So there we go, guys. Bill, you have your prediction 42-17. Trevor, you went 42-6. Yep. I went 45-10. Ryan was very close to Bill. Ryan went 41-17, and he had Virginia scoring a late touchdown to get to that 17, which would be the second most points any team has scored on Notre Dame all season long. Think about that. In week 10, they give up 17 points, and it's the second most points they've allowed in a game all season. That is a level of dominance we haven't seen in a while in South Bend, guys. There's no question about it. So, Trev, great stuff today. Thank you for being with us. Trev is going to have some basketball stuff coming up. Notre Dame's going to have a nice little Big East revival this weekend when they head down to Washington, D.C. to play, it's on the road, right? It is down in D.C., correct?
It's on the road.
The Georgetown Hoyas. So an old school Big East rivalry game from back in the day. Trevor will have something on that. And of course, this weekend we'll have tons of coverage about the big matchups for Notre Dame and what they're going to do against Virginia. So Trev, thanks for being with me, man. Talk to you guys again here soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. So Bill Bender, my guy, how are you today, Bill?
This is 3 weeks in a row where I wasn't on mute to start. I'd like to congratulate myself. I know we got a lot to get into.
Don't jinx yourself, Bill. Don't jinx yourself. You're going to mute yourself when we're about to talk about the big game this week.
Before we even get started, I want to encourage your listeners here. Tomorrow, we will have 3 articles out tomorrow that I did this week, and they were all SEC, ACC, Big 12 tiebreaker articles. We plot out every scenario possible as it gets messy here down the stretch. I felt like a
podcast today as well, right?
Yes, we talked about it. Bill and I talked about it, and I feel like I went back to college. Like it was like a statistics course in college where you had to get everything right. And bottom line, I think the Big 12 and the ACC are a little more clear cut and dry what needs to happen. The SEC could get entirely messy, and we can get into some of that today. as we go through some of these picks.
Yeah, it's an interesting weekend, Bill. I mentioned to my team that there's not a lot of big games scheduled for the weekend, which what we have seen this season has often resulted in chaos. When they were messing with you, they can hear you. They were just giving you a hard time for you being muted. So I saw that response. They were just busting your chops because
I thought my mic wasn't.
Yeah, no, pretending like you were muted and just messing with you. That's that Irish Life 99, just busting your chops a little bit. So, but in the weeks where we have talked about in the past, where it doesn't look like a great slate of football, there's been a lot of chaos, a lot of upsets, and so there's some interesting games that impact positioning for maybe the group of 5 game. There's some games that could impact maybe if chaos breaks out in the SEC. There's all types of intriguing games this weekend, Bill, even though there's not there's no Georgia Ole Miss, Georgia Bama, Texas Georgia, Notre Dame against Texas A&M. There's no Michigan Ohio State, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon. There's none of that this weekend. In my opinion, outside of one game, but there's a lot of interesting games. And so we're going to go through a few games here that interest us. We'll have a couple upset alert games. Hint, hint, they're in the Big 12 again. And then, of course, we'll break down the big game between Tennessee and Georgia. So the game I want to talk first about, Bill, is a game that's not getting talked a lot about. It matters for Notre Dame, but it also could potentially matter if there is a big upset in the Mountain West at some point in time this season, and that is Tulane playing at Navy. Obviously, Navy was the second group of 5 team that was ranked in the top 25 at one point in time this season before they played Notre Dame and got smacked, and then went on the road and got upset by Rice in a game where there was like a 5-hour weather delay. And Tulane started their season off 1-2, lost to Kansas State at home by a touchdown, went on the road and lost to Oklahoma. And since then, under John Summerall, they've been hot. They've won 7 in a row. They're coming off of a 52-6 win over Temple. They went on the road and beat Rice, so got a big win there. Blew out Trent Dilfer's UAB Blazers 71-20. Beat South Florida, who's a scrappy team, not a great team in the AAC this year, but a scrappy team at 4-5, and has battled in some games, but beat them 45-10. So they're not only winning, Bill, but for the most part, they're winning convincingly, and they're doing to teams what Navy was doing to teams before the Notre Dame game. The winner of this game takes control for one of the 2 spots in the AAC, with Army being the other, right? Those are the 3 teams really battling for that. But it's also with Tulane cracking the college football playoff top 25 this week, Bill. It also puts Tulane with a big road win over Navy. They could jump up enough these next couple weeks to kind of take advantage if Boise were to lose in the championship game, or even get upset by a San Jose State or something like that beforehand. This is a big win for Tulane to potentially put themselves within striking distance of passing Boise should the Broncos lose. I mean, they have to lose. They're never going to get close to Boise unless Boise loses. But it does put this is the kind of game that could vault one of these 2 teams in a position where, whether Army, whether it's Tulane, to maybe steal that spot if the Broncos get beat at some point in time.
Tulane is – so, as you know, I made a joke earlier, Ohio University guy, watch Group 5 ball. Tulane is getting penalized for playing 2 Power 5 teams or Power 4. I watched when they played Kansas State. I was in the press box in Ann Arbor, but, Heather Dinich and I were watching the end of that game together. And, obviously Tulane had a shot to beat Kansas State. Then they lose to Oklahoma the next week in a game that was very tight. And I would submit that they could make a case that they're the best team in the Group 5 for sure. If they beat Navy, get to the American Athletic Conference Championship. John Summerall, he's not an up-and-coming coach. He's here. They even won at Troy. He's winning here. They beat Louisiana, a Sun Belt team, earlier in the season. So all of that works in their favor. Now, Boise State has the drop and did play well against Oregon. But other end of this to me is we'll play a little would you rather. Would you rather watch Boise State or Tulane go play Ohio State in a first-round game and lose? Or would you rather watch Boise State, Tulane, Ohio University out of the MAC, and Louisiana or whoever wins the Sun Belt play in their own Final Four and playing in? I would
love to see them play in their own 8-team tournament. I would love to see that.
Yeah,
that would be much better football. 100% agree with that.
FBS Division II championship.
The
Why
number
not?
of group of five, like you could point to like Boise back in the early 2000s under Chris Peterson. Maybe they had a couple teams that could have gone on some runs, but that era is gone. And that was a unique
Right.
Boise State team. The other teams that were capable of doing that, Bill, are all now Power 5 teams. Utah's now a Power 5 team. TCU's now a Power 5 team. BYU's now a Power 5 team. Those teams that were potential could have gone into a 12-team playoff back in the 2000s and done damage. I mean, you and I remember watching Urban Meyer's Utah team obliterate Pitt in, what was it, the Fiesta Bowl or one of those bowl games. Those teams, that era is gone because everybody but Boise is now, I mean, SMU's now gone too. Memphis is probably going to be gone somewhat soon. I would much rather see something like that where Navy, like this year, it'd be Boise, it'd be UNLV, it'd be Colorado State, Boise, Louisiana. By the way, you talked about them beating Louisiana. That's Louisiana's only loss this season was at home to Tulane, by the way. Seeing those teams playing like their own 8-team tournament, I would much rather see that than to see Ashton Genty get his season and his career ended having to go on the road to play Oregon, Ohio State, Notre Dame, somebody like that. I would much rather let's see that kid play 3 or 4 games and see how that goes.
It's as an Ohio University grad, I see the allure of both. I always tell people that the coolest moment as an Ohio University grad, football or men's basketball, was when they went to the Sweet 16, played North Carolina to the final buzzer, lost in overtime because I still hate Harrison Barnes. He makes a 3, a ridiculous. But football-wise, our best moment is a Camellia Bowl victory or an Independence Bowl victory. Nothing. They haven't won a MAC championship since 1968. So for me, they could win the MAC title this year, but I think the Sun Belt Conference USA MAC, they have very little hope of going to the playoff. Right. I think most of those will be swallowed up by the Mountain West or the American Athletic Conference. So to me, I would go down to Athens in a heartbeat if they were playing in a FBS Division II title game against Boise State. It's kind of like when you and I were growing up, how Marshall Youngstown State was a big deal. Probably not as big a deal now. Like North Dakota State's a big deal to some in the Dakotas, but we watch.
But they're just so dominant now that it's not the same as what it used to be when we were younger, where North Dakota would creep up one year and knock off a Youngstown.
Montana,
right? Yeah, Montana had some great teams back then, right?
I would rather watch that and have a heightened sense of interest than watching a team that I think, despite the idea of a Cinderella winning, is it better to squeeze in the 4th team or in Indiana, better to put them in the playoff over the group of 5 school? That's my personal thought. Some people might disagree, but that's where I'm at.
You could even do something where if a group of 5 team was legitimately ranked in the top 12, they could have a choice to play in one or the other. Maybe something like that if they're legitimately ranked in the top 12. So if there is that 04 Boise team, they would have the option of competing for that championship. You could do something like that. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one, Bill. I'm with you on that one. But for Tulane, you talk about it too, Bill. They lost a lot. Willie Fritz is a heck of a football coach, and he's turning Houston around a lot quicker than I thought he was going to. When you look at what they look like in September to what they look like now, obviously lost Michael Pratt, lost a lot of talent the last couple of years, and John Summerall comes in and he gets them on track right away. And like you mentioned, they were competitive in both of those games. They were only losing to Oklahoma 24-19 early in the 3rd quarter or 4th quarter. They had a pick 6 that got them back into that game. So quality football team, and this is a big game for them to kind of position themselves into that spot. And for Navy, it's interesting. If Navy wins, is that enough for them to kind of jump into Tulane's spot right there at 25? They'd be 8-2 now. One of their losses would be to the hottest team in college football right now, which is Notre Dame. Nobody's dominating teams the way that Notre Dame has the last 7 games. They're just not even playing competitive football games. And Navy, unfortunately for them, caught Notre Dame at the worst time. Maybe that cracks them in. But at the very least, if this is a big road win over a team that had been ranked for Tulane, that if they win, it could vault them up a few spots.
I got them winning by 10. Tulane 34, Navy 24.
They haven't been able to get right since the Notre Dame game. Even the game they won this past weekend, they just their offense just looked like they still look a little shell-shocked from the absolute beatdown that they got at Notre Dame.
Maybe they bounce back a little bit and, make it competitive because, as you know, when you play option teams, they can frustrate you. These games are tough. Last week I thought North Texas Army would be a shootout, and I think the final score was 14-3. But I think Tulane and Summerall, like I said, Summerall, if you're an SEC school, he'd coach in the South. He's not going to coach in Big Ten country, but keep an eye on him. Really good up-and-coming coach.
So let's get to, speaking of the South and speaking of the SEC, Bill, let's get to a very interesting game in the SEC this weekend. The game that's going to get all the attention is obviously the Georgia and Tennessee game. And then there's also a ranked matchup between Missouri and South Carolina. But here's an interesting game, which is number 22 LSU at Florida. Couple different aspects of this. Both teams suffered really bad losses last week. And when I mean bad, I mean they got whooped. Florida got dominated by Texas, and of course LSU got absolutely destroyed at home by Alabama because LSU has still not figured out how to defend a mobile quarterback. Still, even after Marcel Reed and after what Lenore Sellers did to them back in week 3. So for LSU, it's can you bounce back? For Florida is, okay, your head coach is staying and you're coming off of a bad loss. You've got DJ Lagway coming back. Can they get back to playing the way they were pre-Texas, which was, even though they lost a couple games, they battled Georgia for 4 quarters. They battled Tennessee for 4 quarters. They dominated Kentucky. Can they get back to that and earn a huge season? This would be a season-saving win for Florida, in my opinion. If they can knock off LSU, it gives them some – because they're going to probably lose their next couple games, or at least one of their next games. But if they win this game, and then 2 weeks they can beat Florida State, because they can absolutely beat Florida State, all of a sudden Florida's going to a bowl game, Bill. And Billy Napier's been able to get some momentum and earn some big wins.
Yeah, we've all known that this November was going to be brutal for them, and it's about headspace here between two teams. I mean, LSU got just nuked by Alabama last week, and we'll see how BK has them playing on the road. I mean, a big question here is DJ Lagway going to play? It sounds like he is. If Aiden Warner starts, LSU will win. I mean,
big
if DJ Lagway has this breakout performance and they win this game, they're going to beat Florida State. They get to 6-6. Some people I thought 5-7 was reasonable with this schedule. So I think Billy Napier again has done a reasonable job.
Yeah.
Reasonable and Gainesville does not come across in the same sentence often.
Yeah.
But you look at the history of LSU Florida, they've had some wonky finishes. So it could be a fun game.
Well, not only would it be 6-6, Bill, which is better than what most people thought, but let's be honest too. They've played a couple games. You're like, dude, they battled in that game. They battled against Tennessee. They battled against Georgia. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt against Georgia, who knows how that game turns out? You know what I mean? I mean, they were what, 14-10, 14-3, like when he got hurt. So the question is, okay, he plays, but is he mobile enough? Is he healthy? Because it was a hamstring injury. Is he able to run around and make plays? Because that's what's been kryptonite to this LSU team. If he's just going to sit back in the pocket and have to be a passer, I think that could be where they have some problems. You mentioned headspace. To me, that's the key to the game. Where is LSU in their head?
Right.
Like, do they come out pissed off and looking to kind of get back on track? Because here's the crazy thing, Bill, and just drop a little hint, because I want people to listen to the CFP Nation show and read your article. But the crazy scenario is there's a decent chance that if chaos happens in the SEC, LSU still has a shot to get to the SEC title game if they win out.
They really do, and despite the non-conference loss. So there's a potential for a 8-team tie in the SEC standings in 3 weeks, which is not unfathomable. I had to get all those syllables out. Wow. But what I did yesterday, and I'll give your listeners a hint. We put together a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. You're going to hear the phrase common opponent so much on the TV the next 3 weeks that I was like, well, why don't I show all the common opponents? Put it in a spreadsheet. X-axis, every opponent. Y-axis. Wait, Y is this one. X this way. All the teams that are in the hunt. So you can literally see, okay, we're in the hunt here. We're in the hunt here. The potential really rests on a couple games. If Missouri beats South Carolina, that heats it up. I don't think that's going to happen. If LSU wins out, that's another wrinkle. And if Texas A&M beats Texas and Texas somehow loses, or if Texas somehow loses to Kentucky or Arkansas probably being better shot at that, in my opinion, because the Southwest Conference roots of that game, you are going to have a mess. So, yeah, I think headspace is huge. And the fact that LSU still has a little more something to play for, that if they're even 75% motivated, that they should win this game as long as they don't make a bunch of mistakes.
Here's the thing, Bill. Florida, the games they've been competitive in recent weeks are against teams that are struggling offensively. When you look at UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, all teams struggling offensively. Texas is not. At least wasn't in this game.
No.
But if you look at the 4-game stretch leading into the Texas game, a win over UCF, a blowout win over Kentucky, really hard fought last-second loss in overtime to Tennessee, and a game against Georgia where they led for at least half the game. They forced 8 interceptions in those 4 games. Against Texas, they had 0 and gave up 5 touchdown passes. Their pass defense, by and large, has not been that good this season. They're getting a little bit healthier on the back end of that defense. That's going to be the key. That's going to be the key. Can they force Garrett Nussmeier into turnovers, who he has been prone to turnovers? If they can't force him into turnovers, they're going to get beat by 10 plus. If they can force him into some of the turnovers, which we have seen him be more than willing to throw, he's got 11 interceptions on the season, and he's got 5 in his last 2 games, both losses. Then in their 3 losses this season, he has 6 interceptions. If Florida can do that, then they have a shot in this game. They're not going to be able to just go toe-to-toe for 4 quarters with LSU without getting some aided by forcing some turnovers from LSU. I think LSU wins this game, but I do think it here's what I think, Bill. I think it's either Florida wins in an upset or LSU routes them. That's what I think is going to happen. Because if LSU's playing well and not turning over, it's going to be 31-13, something like that. If they force some turnovers, then I think Florida actually pulls off the upset, but I'm actually leaning towards right now LSU winning this game.
I got 31-18, 31-17, something like that. 2-score win. Not quite a blowout. Like what my blowout qualification is 20 or more points, but comfortable. LSU, if they're in this game and engaged, I'm not saying Florida's not going to come out and fight, but I want to see which one of these teams, or if both come out and fight and make it like a classic rivalry, SEC old school rivalry, which it has been in the past.
This next phrase I'm going to say, Bill, is something that as someone who's in his mid-40s, are words that I never thought were going to come out of my mouth. Let's talk about this Big Ten matchup between Nebraska and USC.
Yeah, Big Ten, Bill. Your listeners, I want a shirt. Somebody make me a shirt that says Big Ten Bill on it, so I can wear it to this. Like I think maybe I'll make one. It's got to be dry fit. It's interesting, and the quarterbacks. Dylan Raiola, Jaden Maeva, is that correct?
Close enough. Yeah.
Close enough. Nevada kid, Liberty High School, 2 4- or 5-star quarterbacks here going at it for 2 teams struggling to make bowl eligibility. Both coming off a bye week, right? So they've both had time to make some adjustments for this game. It is for me, especially, you said it for you, and for me, it's even worse. It's like, hey, Nebraska, 90s school, grew up hating them, and then then loved them because they gave my alma mater Frank. USC always hated them as a kid. You're conditioned to hate them as a kid growing up in Ohio. And now they, doing their thing in the Big Ten. But I guess this game's more important for Lincoln Riley. I don't guess. I do think it's more important for Lincoln Riley because there's some heat there. He's not going to get fired, I don't think. But there's some people openly wondering, were they right to do that? Yeah. And that's what's getting interesting out there at Troy.
I think it's all right. USC, losers of 4 of their last 5. And in between there, they have a blowout win over Rutgers. They lost by 7. On the season, they've lost by 3. They've lost by 7, 3, 1, and 5. At home this season, they have a 48-point win over Utah State, a 17-point win over Wisconsin, where they were behind, I believe, 21-10 at one point in time. Lost in overtime to Penn State, that mighty, powerful, all-knowing Penn State team that everybody loves but can't tell me a good win they've had. And then Rutgers, they blew out Rutgers. They're a different team away from home, and this game is at home. I actually think this is kind of a big game for Matt Rule.
Okay.
because you start the season 5-1. People are feeling really good about your team. You blow out Colorado, you get into the top 25, and then all of a sudden the wheels fall off a little bit. You get blown out by Indiana, and you get beat by Ohio State. And you're thinking, okay, that hard-fought game against Ohio State, you feel like, okay, they're going to get back on track, and they got UCLA coming at home. That game completely changed the trajectory of their season, because instead of being 6-3 right now, with a tough finish at Wisconsin, at USC, home against Wisconsin, at Iowa, there is now a chance Nebraska doesn't go to a bowl game.
Right.
And if I'd have told you that after they beat Rutgers to go to 5-1, you'd have been like, do they have like a massive injuries? I think this is a huge game for both teams. I don't think Matt Rule gets on the hot seat if they lose out, but all the momentum they've got from recruiting and all the different things, if they kind of whimper into the end of the season, I also think he needs a bowl game, because I think he needs that extra month of development with a relatively young group of football players. That'd be huge for Dylan Raiola, for example. But this is a huge game for both of these teams, because one coach is fighting for his life, in my opinion, his coaching life. Because if Lincoln Riley loses this game, well, he's not going to go to a bowl game.
Nope.
I mean, you've gotten worse all 3 years, and knowing USC the way that I do, they're going to watch what Danton Lynn did this year and think, well, maybe he should be our head football coach.
Yep.
And then with Matt Rule, it's like, you've got to get some momentum back, man. And my point is, Bill, this is the kind of game for Nebraska that gets all that momentum back. You go on the road and beat USC, you get all the momentum back. You're bowl eligible. And I think they calm down a little bit, beat Wisconsin next week. And 7-5 isn't what we wanted as a team, but you know what? It's progress. Let's go to the bowl game and win game number 8. I think it's huge for Nebraska.
Cool uniform game. If Nebraska wears their red pants.
Game.
Yeah. Psychologically, they need to get to a bowl game as a program. You look at that number. I remember Rick Neuheisel at Big Ten Media Day telling us that I can't fathom that program not being in a bowl game for that long. And for them to do that, Dylan Raiola, you mentioned more development for him if they get to a bowl game. Matt Rule, I think he's done a nice job. I still think he's the guy for that job. The way they fought against Ohio State showed me a lot about them. But then the old Lou Holtz adage, they got beat twice. They got beat by Ohio State, then they got beat by UCLA, probably as a result of getting beat. Yeah. So how did they react to that? How do they go out there and put up a good fight? 1-score game, we all know the trend. Nebraska 1-3 in 1-score games. That's a trend that's haunted that program for years and years. And I think the numbers, it's like 3-16 or 3-17. But USC, I like them.
Also 1-5 this year in 1-score games.
So somebody's got to win a 1-score game here, is what I'm telling you.
Were you surprised by the 9.5-point spread? USC is a 9.5-point spread. I was shocked by that.
I think in the show with Troche, this was one of my higher up confidence picks that Nebraska covers. I don't know that they win, but I just see a 1-score game between. Plus, you're playing a new quarterback. It's not like he's going to come in and light it up. For Dylan Raiola, limiting mistakes on the road. USC has the better perimeter players. I think that's a difference maker. I got Nebraska,
and the Indiana game is an anomaly for their season.
Absolutely,
every other game they've lost has been a close game. They lost to Illinois by a touchdown in the game they led. They lost to Ohio State in the game they led by 4. They lost to UCLA in a close game. That surprised me.
Yep,
that really surprised me.
I didn't have this game picked originally during the week, but I'll give you a score. I got 27-21 USC. Okay. They hang on, and 1-score game.
Almost every game they've played this year has been somewhere like 27-20 win, 27-24 loss, 24-17 win.
They like that 27 number, I think.
I think that's kind of where it is. I've got USC winning 27-20. For Notre Dame, USC winning is good for Notre Dame. It'd be nice because I think there could be a narrative created if USC with the new starting quarterback beats Nebraska, routes UCLA. That because the computer models love USC. They're still top 20 in 2 computer models that I've seen this year, Bill, or this week. They win 2 games. They're 6-5. It's not that it's like, beat USC and all of a sudden, bring on Bama, but it's more of it'll just be another kind of feather in Notre Dame's cap if they go on the road and beat USC out in LA, a team that's hard to beat at home, or at least has been so far this season. I think Nebraska's offense is struggling to the point where they're just going to have a hard time beating USC. So I have USC winning 27-20, and I actually think Nebraska scores late to make it that. I think it's like 2013 USC scores to kind of put it away. Nebraska scores late. So, I mean, I see it being a competitive game, but it's more of a UCA goes up 2 scores, Nebraska makes it a 1-score game. USC goes up 2 scores, Nebraska makes it a 1-score game. I think that's kind of how I see it going, Bill.
I got you. It'll be a hard, Nebraska will fight, but they'll lose another 1-score game, and we'll be like, when will this team ever win one of these? And you, like you said, you look at their schedule, bowl game becomes dicey.
Very, very. Bill, let's talk about a couple upsets. We have our upset alert period, and we could keep calling it upset alerts time, or we could just call it, okay, it's Big 12 time. Let's talk about the Big 12. I do think there's a couple games in the Big 12. The Big 12, it's funny, Bill. We talk about these upset alerts, and they keep happening. That's partly why we're doing it, right? I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the Big 12 have some really wild upsets. 2 weeks ago, Iowa State's in the top 10 or top 12, and now all of a sudden they are out of the top 25 because they had 2 weeks ago. Texas Tech goes on the road and beats number 11 Iowa State. Houston beats number 17 Kansas State in a game. Arizona State goes on the road, beats Oklahoma. This past week, we saw more upsets this past weekend in the Big 12. Almost saw another one with Utah getting beat by BYU at the end with some help from the officials. Kansas beats Iowa State, knocks them out of the top 25. Texas Tech jumps all over Colorado. Then Colorado kind of comes back and wins. But see a lot of upsets in the Big 12 because there's just a lot of parity in the Big 12. There's not a lot separating Team 1 from Team 10, 11, 12. So a couple games I have my eye on this week, Bill. First one is Kansas at BYU. Now, on paper, this game should not really be considered an upset special. Kansas has been struggling a little bit this season. They're 3-6, but I'll tell you what, this is a really good 3-6 football team that has lost a lot of close games. They lost to Illinois by 6, UNLV by 3, West Virginia by 4, Arizona State by 4, Kansas State by 2. Their quote-unquote worst loss of the year was an 11-point loss to TCU. They've been banged up. They're healthy. Jalen Daniels is healthy. Devin Neal is healthy. And they're coming off of an absolute outstanding performance in their upset win over Iowa State. And Iowa State team, Bill, that coming into that game had a really scrappy defense and had played well on defense. Kansas is getting hot, and BYU keeps winning, but they're winning ugly. Are they going to be able? Are they going to have some problems with the athleticism that Kansas is going to bring on offense with that quarterback, Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal? I got a potential upset alert. What say you, Mr.
Yeah,
Dunn?
Bill does too. Churchy liked that one too. I don't like it as much because it's in Provo. Yeah, they escaped Utah. There's no doubt. It was a horrible call. If I'm the Utah athletic director, Mark Harlan, I would have done the exact same thing. Probably worse. Probably would have had to bleep some stuff out. But BYU won. They find ways, and I don't penalize teams for winning close games in a league where everybody's close.
Right.
So I'm not going to do that to BYU. You were the one that were on to them earlier than I was. You liked them more than Iowa State. I didn't. I think Jake Retzlaff has done a good job. They show flashes of a dynamic offense, then they'll be hit or miss. Their defense always plays hard. And they're at Provo where they force turnovers. They live off turnovers. Mm-hmm. That's not perfect, but +6 turnover margin at home. Kansas -2 on the road. I thought it would have been worse for Kansas given their early season struggles. I get it, understand all that, but I mean, I still like the Cougs. I think, again, with the Big 12 tiebreaker article, we're going to show if they lose here, then they go to Tempe next week where they haven't played since 1997. It could get real funky in the Big 12 real quick because Arizona State's a team for me that you got to watch the next 2 weeks. Not only do they play Kansas State and BYU, they have Cam Scatterbo. He's one of my favorite players in college football. How much have you watched him?
I love that kid.
Love him, don't you?
That kid. Oh, gosh. Yeah, and I love how he corrects people for saying his name incorrectly, which is freaking great. I absolutely
Did I say it incorrectly?
No. I was watching a show, and I don't remember who the silent reporter was, but she was like, "Hey, she said his name, and he was like, it's actually this," and people get it wrong. I just thought it was hilarious, but he's an old school throwback running back, and just, I mean, he looks like a kid that would have been playing at Mount Union when I was in college and when I was coaching, right?
Sure.
Like that short, sawed off, real muscular kid that doesn't look like a great athlete, but just goes out and runs for 200 yards. He's a heck of a football player. And Kenny Dillingham is not getting enough talk nationally for the job he's done coaching that football team this year. He has done an absolutely brilliant job with that football team. I mean, they're 7-2 right now. He inherited a mess.
He did.
3-9 last year, lots of blows, only scored 17 points per game. They're over 30 this season. Their 5-star quarterback leaves. They only lose by 8 at Texas Tech. They lose by Cincinnati 10. Blowout win over Oklahoma State. Convincing win over Utah where they just out-physicaled Utah. They beat Kansas. Went on the road, beat a good Texas State team. That was an entertaining game. They had to battle in that game. Beat Mississippi State at home. They're not a great team, but they are getting it done. And, he's not getting enough credit for the job he's done this season. There's no doubt about it. But regarding the Kansas BYU game, if I have to pick the game, I'm going with BYU at home, but I think this could get really interesting because, BYU is you talked about the turnover aspect, right? BYU has forced at least 2 turnovers in each of their last 6 games overall. Forget the home thing. Overall, when they beat SMU, a big part of that was they had 3 turnovers. They forced 3 turnovers in that game. And when you look at this Kansas football team on offense, they don't turn the ball over a lot. Bill, they have 13 turnovers on the season, but 10 of them came in their first 4 games. They've only turned the ball over twice in their last 4 games, and that was 2 turnovers and a loss at Kansas State by 2. In their last 3 games, they blew out Houston, beat Iowa State by 9, and lost on the road to number 20 Kansas State by 2 points. And so that part of it's going to be big. But the other one, too, is BYU can get into some trouble when they start turning the ball over. That's what hurt them against Oklahoma State. And that's what hurt them against SMU that allowed SMU to kind of claw back in that game a little bit. So they're going to have to protect the football as well. But I think it's going to come down to, can Kansas get off to an early start? We talk a lot about fast starts when it comes to Notre Dame. Kansas has to come out and move the ball and score early. If they don't have a lead at the end of the first quarter, they're toast. Because that crowd is very loud and very rabid, especially when BYU is good. You need to jump on them and hope that you can kind of do – because if they jump on BYU like Oklahoma State did, they won't come back on this Kansas team like they did against Oklahoma State.
Right.
And so we'll see if they can do that. I got BYU winning, Bill, but I haven't felt good about picking them to win all week. And I've been very high on BYU, but this Kansas team is starting to play like the Kansas team we thought they were going to be coming into the season. They just need Jalen Daniels to be Jalen Daniels. You need to
jump in the Slack with me and Troche at midnight and 1 a.m. when we're watching BYU and these Big 12 late night games. It's fun. We talked about that on the pod. I throw down a Coke Zero at midnight just to stay awake. And one of the things though to watch in this game, BYU has a unique, distinct home field advantage in my opinion. It's not, and Kansas has never played there in school history ever.
They play elevation and just kind of
being that or just the stadium. And if you haven't been, if these kids have never been to Utah, I mean, Utah has a distinct college football home field advantage. Arizona State does. And I think these Big 12 schools, that's probably a story I need to look into. It's the reason why I think Arizona State may bump into some trouble at Kansas State. When you haven't been to these places, that unfamiliarity factor matters. It's not like, a Ohio State kid goes into Spartan Stadium. Maybe not as much now, but I mean, in the past, they would go to Illinois twice a year. So Champaign wasn't weird. Or twice a year, twice every.
And it's the same type of climate, same type of topography.
Right, like that kind of stuff.
Now you're going from I'm playing in the flatlands of Kansas, and now I got to go into the mountains of Salt Lake City, or I got to go into the desert in Arizona. It's a much different situation.
I got BYU by a touchdown, but all of your concerns are noted and on the record. I think that could be interesting. I'll address that comment by DT Rural Hunter. Similar, Boise State, San Jose State this weekend. Tricky game, road game. Ken Niumatalolo has San Jose State playing competitive. I'm with you. I still like Boise State, but that one's going to be close too. So, you got to stay up late and watch these games. And this is definitely one to do.
Well, my first time watching this San Jose State team was that Washington State game early in the year where they lost late. I was like, this is a team that can score. Why? It was wild watching Ken Niumatalolo run an offense where they're dropping back and going.
Nick Nash can play. They've got a really good receiver.
Yeah, he's really good. Another Big 12 game that I got my eye on, Bill, is Utah at Colorado. And here's why I have this one on a little bit of an upset alert. Colorado's starting to feel really good about themselves, and I want to see them handle success a little bit. They got to show me they can handle success. So far, so good. The other thing is Utah is going to come into this game one of two ways, and
Right.
this is going to be a huge dichotomy game. Utah is going to come into this game completely dejected because of how last week ended, and Colorado is going to blow them out. Just blow them out. Or Utah comes into this game real pissed off, knowing that their season is on the line if they want to get to a bowl game, because they are 4-5 right now, and they have to play Iowa State and at UCF. They lose this game, bowl game is going to be real tough. And they're going to come out ticked off with something to prove, chip on their shoulder, and they're going to upset Colorado, because this is a less talented Utah team than we've seen in recent seasons athletically. It's still a physical Utah team. Colorado can out-athlete them, but I would be concerned about them getting beat up in the trenches, sort of like we saw against Nebraska. That could be the great equalizer, but I just don't know which version of Utah shows up. But if a pissed off Utah shows up into Denver this weekend, this game could get very interesting. I like Colorado in this game, Bill, but I could see this being one of those, either Utah upsets them or Colorado blows them out, much like I said earlier when I talked about LSU and Florida.
Well, Utah won the game 23-17 last year, but there's not much to take off that because both teams had backup quarterbacks. Shedeur didn't play. Utah was down to their whatever quarterback at that point. I think to your point about being one or the other, that's where you trust Kyle Whittingham, a 20-year coach that's his job. And he's been down this road before. They struggled on offense. They played very inspired on the defensive side last week. They gave up three passes of 20 yards or more. BYU did hit a couple on them, but just 3 in a game. BYU was also 1 of 12 on third down. So to your point, can they make Colorado uncomfortable with that front seven? Can they run the ball and play keep away a little bit with a physical offensive line? Or is Utah are we just kind of banking on that because of their past? And for Colorado, it's definitely a home field advantage, early kick, chance for Shedeur to keep going and Travis Hunter to keep going. I'm same as you. I like Colorado, but I'm not wild about that spread. And the spread, again, am I going to misread this spread? It keeps going up, right? Yeah. I think it's up to 12 or 11.5.
Well, I believe Utah is going to be down to their third string quarterback in this game as well.
Well, they played him last week, right? Yeah. Rose. So he played. Yeah. And what's the difference between Rose and Isaac Wilson? Probably less turnovers, honestly. Yeah. And I think Colorado wins 27-20. But I got my eye. I had this one circled. I thought Texas Tech would be a tough game for them. It was. I'm starting to think that Colorado wins here and wins next week against Kansas, although we will revisit that one next week.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm wondering if Mike Gundy's the one to spoil it all for him at the end of the year. That's the one I can kind of see coming.
Bill, I'm going to give you the overall record of teams ranked in the top 11 in scoring defense. 9-0, 8-1. That's Ohio State. 8-1. Notre Dame, 8-1 Texas, 8-1 Tennessee, 8-2 Ole Miss, 10-0 Indiana. They're 10-0, right? Indiana.
Yep.
10-0 Indiana. 8-1 Penn State, 10-0 Oregon. You've got 7-2 James Madison, and then 4-5 Utah.
It's enough.
Defense hasn't been their problem this year, Bill. I mean, even in their current 5-game losing streak, their last 3 games, they gave up 22 points. The last bit of that points was aided by officials. 17 points in a loss to Houston, 13 points in a loss to TCU, 27 points in a loss to Arizona State, and 23 points in a loss to Arizona. And I believe one of those in those 2 Arizonas was a couple of those scores were set up by short field turnovers in those games. So that has not been their issue. It's can they score, and that's what this is going to come down.
I'll
to.
lay it out for you this way. I think Colorado has a better chance of losing than BYU. You can text me and revisit that Saturday, but I think because of that Utah defense could make this interesting.
Yeah,
in the way you just laid it out, because I watched their front seven, they fly. You know the X's and O's stuff better than I do, but the way that they get to the football, they will shut down Colorado on the ground. They're going to put pressure on Shedeur to make third down throws, and they're good on third down.
Mm-hmm.
If their offense gives them anything in return and plays keep away a little bit, they can pull this one out.
Yeah. So we'll see how those two Big 12 games go, Bill. Let's get into the big game of the week. Did you want to talk at all about the Missouri-South Carolina game? I really am good.
We can skip over it. I got South
Missouri
Carolina
has
winning. Right.
No business being ranked right now, in my opinion. But
we can skip through.
I think South Carolina wins as well. Let's get into the big game this weekend, because this is the game that's going to have it's the only game this weekend that's guaranteed to have college football playoff implications, in my opinion. Like, no matter the outcome, it's going to shake up the college football playoff rankings. You've got number 7 Tennessee playing at number 12 Georgia. Bill, I don't know what the latest is. I know that the latest that I've heard is that Nico, the quarterback for Tennessee. I always get his name.
Maliava.
He is still questionable. There's some reporting he is out, some reporting that's not given guaranteed yet. Georgia's a 10-point favorite. Georgia is coming off of an absolute beatdown at the hands of Ole Miss this past weekend. It's the first time since 2020 that they've lost to a team other than Alabama, I believe, correct? Got absolutely smacked this past weekend. Tennessee is a team with an outstanding defense, but an offense that's been struggling for a while. Georgia is kind of the same way. They're very similar teams in their result. Great defense, at least great front seven. Both have somewhat questionable secondaries at times, but offenses that are struggling. I think this is going to be one of the uglier big games of the season, in my opinion, meaning like low scoring. I think it's going to be a defensive game, and it's going to go a lot like the games that Tennessee has played lately. Whoever wins, it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think this Tennessee defense is legit, and but it's going to come down to, what you talked about last week, Bill, was, this Kirby Smart just doesn't lose games like this.
Nope.
Well, now he has. We have seen Kirby Smart handle success for a long time. How does Kirby Smart handle adversity? And how does this program respond to something that hasn't happened to them a whole lot in recent years? Because even when Bama has beaten them, like last year, Bama beat them in a very competitive game. How do they handle that, Bill? That's going to be a big part of this game. And can Tennessee run the ball on Georgia? Because their offense works best when they run the football. They're just not the passing team they were a couple years ago. It's going to be it's going to be a bit of a throwback SEC game, Bill. I mean, the SEC is becoming more about scoring and all. I think this is going to be a bit of a throwback SEC game where it's going to be a 20-something to 20-something physical, hard-hitting football game.
Yeah, and it's hard. You got to evaluate the game one way or the other. Is Nico in or is he out? I think you're very on to the fact that, like, a couple years ago when they played and it was 1 versus 2 technically, because we're in the AP, it was wet, rainy, gross. Georgia toyed with them, out-physicaled them, played like that. I think Tennessee's a little bit different team. Heupel has we're super fast, we're going to get up and down. They're grimy, man. They run the ball well with Dylan Sampson. They play awesome defense. James Pierce, when you look at his hurries, hits, sacks, you're over 40. He's a beast, complete beast. And I think they're going to try to muddy this game up, because even if Nico plays, they're going to have to do it that way. And it adds up, because this series has not been competitive. Georgia's kicked their backside. Look, I edited myself
Good job, Bill.
for the last 7 years. I'm evolving. So they've dominated this series, though.
Well, Bill, just real quick, let me add a little context to what you're saying. So the last time Tennessee won was 2016 in Athens, by the way. Since then, Georgia has won every game 41-0, 38-12, 43-14, 44-21, 41-17, 27-13, and 38-10. So not only are they just dominating from, hey, we've won 7 in a row, but they're dominating it literally also. Like they just haven't been competitive games at all, which adds to something.
So to your point about knowing Georgia, okay, we've done this podcast almost every week. I don't think I've got a big Georgia game right. Picked them to beat Alabama, wrong. Picked them to lose to Texas, wrong. Picked them to beat Ole Miss, wrong. So whatever I say, probably go the other way if you want to put a couple dollars on it. But They haven't. Here's the other stat I keep throwing out. I said it on the earlier podcast with Bill. They have not lost a game at home since the day I turned 40 years old, and I am 45. They lost on October 12th, 2019, on my 40th birthday to South Carolina at home.
It was not good. It was 4-8.
Have not lost. Now, let's talk about the other end of this.
When Bama beat them in 2020, that was it. That was in Tuscaloosa?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they haven't lost a home game in five years. And that's self-serving, but you remember when you turn 40, by the way. You always will remember that birthday. I remember, because you know why I remember is I was off that day. I requested to be off on a college football Saturday on my 40th birthday. Ended up having a few too many. But during the day, I was watching Will Muschamp beat Georgia, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, should I be writing about this? Should I be writing? No, step away, step away, step away. And I was able to do it that day. So let's talk about the consequences now. What do you want to do? The scores first? Let's do scores first.
Let's wrap that part up. And there's two parts of this game that I got my eye on, Bill, that could see us, because I've got Georgia winning. I have Georgia winning 24-20. That's how I have them winning in a game that I think it's like the Nebraska game. I see Tennessee scoring last and trying to get an onside to get the ball, because I don't know that Tennessee is going to have enough offense to win. But here's a couple interesting things that are going to determine this game. Number one, Tennessee has a dynamic, talented run game that has gone for at least 185 yards in each of the last three games against Alabama, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. They went for 214 against Bama, 240 against Mississippi State. They're going against a Georgia run defense that has not allowed more than 137 yards rushing since the Alabama game, when they had back-to-back games of over 170 or more against Kentucky and Alabama. Outside of that, they've only allowed two other teams to go over 130. That was Ole Miss last week, and then Auburn. They've held three of their opponents to less than 80 yards rushing. Very good run defense. Their issues are on the secondary, which Tennessee has not shown the ability to really take advantage of in the last month. That's number one. Can Tennessee run the football and, like you said, muck this game up? Number two, this is the other aspect that's going to be very interesting. In their current 4-game win streak, and in 6 of their last 7 wins, not counting the Kent State game because Kent State's terrible, they have forced at least 2 turnovers in each game of their wins. Against Arkansas, they forced 0. They forced 9 turnovers in their last 4 games, 3 against Kentucky, 2 against Bama, 2 against Florida, 2 against Mississippi State. They're playing a Georgia offense that in their last 4 games has turned the ball over 11 times and also turned the ball over 4 times against Bama. In their 2 losses, they've turned the ball over 7 times. And the only reason Texas was able to make it close is because Georgia turned the ball over.
Right.
Their offense played terrible in that game. That's going to be the key. You've got to establish the run game to some degree, which can hopefully set up some throws down the field against that secondary. And you've got to force Carson Beck to be Carson Beck, which means turning the ball over. If Tennessee's going to win this game, those 2 things have to happen. And I think they have to happen early, because if they don't, then I could see Georgia kind of getting on them early, and then Tennessee's not coming. They're not coming back from 2 scores down against this team. They don't have the firepower right now on offense to do that.
No, and I got Georgia 26-21. So
we're close.
They'll kick a couple field goals. They'll be held to some field goals. Tennessee will hang around with that defense, and then they'll go for 2 and miss and hold on and win by 5.
So we're on the same page there. Let's talk about what this game
Now
means.
Let's talk about consequences here. So consequences are this. When you look at the playoff picture, here are 2 predictions I have from this. When you look at that SEC article we're running yesterday, it's about the 5th time I promote it, so you better click on it. The consequence is this. Tennessee probably gets knocked out for now. Like Georgia's knocked out for now. Georgia pushes back in. You can't take Ole Miss out. Not at 10-2. Not with a top 10 offense, top 10 defense. They won't take Alabama out regardless, even with that head-to-head loss to Tennessee, because they beat Georgia, because they beat LSU, because they wear red helmets with numbers on the side. You can't take out Texas yet. So the Longhorns have 1 loss. They don't need to say anything else. So the issue here for the SEC becomes this. You're going to get 4 playoff teams. You're going to want 5. I think Texas A&M will lose to Texas, and that'll be that. To get Tennessee squeezed in, they're going to start the propaganda machine. And that will start next week when Indiana, if Indiana goes to Columbus and gets boat raced, that's when it starts. Do you put Indiana in with one loss who's beaten nobody, or do you put Tennessee with that Bama victory, especially if this one's good? I think the committee would put Indiana in and say save themselves, but you're dealing with a Tennessee fan base. Who's their losses would be Arkansas on the road,
and
Georgia. And Georgia on the road,
and a lot of ugly wins in the last couple months,
and a lot of ugly wins. Yeah. Not winning the way Indiana is, but playing teams like, let's be honest,
much more competitive.
Tennessee, I think, would beat Indiana head to head, but that's not my job to. That we talk about that all the time. You always tell me we don't bet based on what the spread would be, or we don't put teams in based on what the spread would be.
Because otherwise your playoff teams every year is Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, and that's not how football works. I mean, that's not how it should work anyway, as far as picking teams. You got results that are on the field. It is going to be interesting if this is a close game. It's going to be tough to drop Tennessee too far. Then if they can go on the road in 2 weeks and beat Vanderbilt, now they've got a really good season-ending win, a team that beat Alabama, and you're going to have a much more you're basically if Tennessee's going to lose, you want them to lose close, and you want Indiana to get wiped out. Because if Indiana loses to Ohio State Penn State's entire resume of being a top 4 team is simply they had a close loss to Ohio State. That's it.
So what do we do if Alabama goes to the SEC championship game, plays Texas, loses, 3-loss team? Yeah. Do you drop them below Tennessee? I hate it because
if Alabama so it's funny you say that, because I was going to bring up a scenario to you. What if Miami and SMU both went out and Miami loses in the ACC title game in a close game? They will have gone into the title game ranked, because from my understanding is the committee is not going to punish teams for playing in the conference title game unless it's a blowout. So if Miami goes into the ACC title game 9th, and Tennessee and Bama goes in there 8th or 10th, or Tennessee is the ACC is not being talked enough about right now as a potential to steal a bid from the SEC or the Big Ten, because SMU's right outside, Miami's 9th. How much are you going to ding Miami for losing to a team that's ranked 13th if it's a close game? Now, if Miami wins, SMU's out because they won't even be in the top 12, so it won't matter. But that could also make things interesting, Bill. If Miami wins out and SMU wins out and Miami's still in the top 10, because I don't see Miami dropping if they keep winning, that could then get things very interesting for them. And if you're an SEC fan and you want a 4th or 5th team, here's what you do. Row the dang boat. Get Penn State, because if Penn State loses a second game, they are out and should be out. I don't care how much the committee loves them or has been bribed by them or what pictures the Penn State leadership has of people on the committee. They are out with 2 losses.
What about Ohio State? Stymie Snerdley says if Indiana beats Ohio State, does Ohio State just swap spots? No, I don't think. I think Ohio State drops. They'll still get in because Ohio State, but to me, their resume would be somewhat flimsy.
Yeah. Ohio State better hope Penn State wins out, because now all of a sudden you've got a great win over Penn State. If Penn State loses a game, now all of a sudden you're big. Now all of a sudden Ohio State, you're in the mold of we have to convince people how good our losses were.
Because you're in the same boat as Tennessee. You're going to Tennessee, and Ohio State becomes the debate now, and that would get heated because Ohio State probably wins the debate based on going to Penn State. But then I'm like, well, Tennessee beat Alabama, so what are we doing? Right. It'll get sticky because Ohio State.
If Penn State loses, Bill, that changes the entire conversation, because Penn State would, in my opinion, then fall behind Tennessee, Bama, Georgia, and Ole Miss.
Well, and Ohio State. Go ahead.
Now a big win for Ohio State is what? A team that's below all those SEC teams, and they had 2 chances to beat you. They had a turnover in the end zone and had a turnover on downs inside the 5. That could get interesting. I still think I'd be shocked if they left Ohio State out, but it at least makes it.
Yeah, me too.
Let's see what happens.
Well, and Ohio State would have the stigma of being that team that they got that $20 million label hanging over them that underperformed. Right. And I don't think they're going to lose to Indiana. I'm going to be honest. I actually don't think it's going to be close. Yeah, but
I think it might be close, but I think they win.
They are playing at Wrigley Field this weekend, by the way, the Buckeyes against
They play
Northwestern.
Northwestern? Oh, wow.
At Wrigley Field. And
Interesting.
so be prepared for third base.
Chances are good. It's going to be very windy because it seems like every time that Ohio State goes out to Chicago to play Northwestern, it's super windy.
Yep.
Yeah, they're going to get that bad Cubs, mojo on them in that game.
My
That's not going to
third
be
base
good,
joke went right over your head. I said the Ohio State Ryan Day third base jokes will be out, but they'll run Northwestern, and then they'll run. I think they'll run Indiana, and quite frankly, I think they're going to run Michigan off the field too.
I think the Indiana game could be a little closer than you think because I think here's the reason why Indiana's defense is legit. They are good.
They are good, and that could make it a fun first half.
And Ohio State's not killing teams that are good. This isn't a vintage Ohio State team where they're just beating everybody by 50. This is not that same team. That they're not good enough at quarterback. They're not good enough in the offensive line. Purdue sucks. They beat Penn State by a touchdown, beat Nebraska by 4. Yeah, they blew out Iowa, but that was a 7-0 game at halftime. You know what I mean? Like this isn't a vintage kill everyone Ohio State team. So I think I do think Ohio State wins, but I think it'll be a more competitive game, maybe than we think, as long as the quarterback's healthy. So when you look at this game, Bill, now if Tennessee wins, Georgia's done. They're done.
Yep.
There's no path for Georgia getting in the playoff if they lose this game. None. Now, ESPN will still talk about it because of how tough they're scheduling. And if anyone else played this schedule, they'd have 4 losses, whatever.
Right.
But you
got to win a few.
Not getting talked enough. Right. You got to win something.
You got to win.
And you can't you can't look like crap against Kentucky. You can't look like crap against Mississippi State. You can't look like crap against Auburn and then tell us how good you are, except when you play really good teams.
Right.
So if they're out, Tennessee could knock them out. And we just said, look, I mean, Kirby doesn't lose games like this. They haven't lost at home since 2019. Well, they haven't lost to anybody not named Bama since 2020. Right. So, I mean, so where is Georgia's mind at? If Georgia shows up locked in, Bill, I think they win.
All right.
But if they don't, then I could see a turnover fest happening and Tennessee pulls off the upset. You 26-21, I'm 24-20. Going to be a wild weekend. So, and we're going to have some huge games to talk about next week, folks. So make sure that you guys tune into that. Tomorrow morning, Bill's show, where he's going to break down all the SEC and all the Week 12 stuff with Bill Troche, will be up at CFB Nation. So make sure you subscribe to that. We're going to put this obviously up on this breakdown as well. So you and I'll be back next week. I believe you're still set to come back next week. Some huge games next week.
Yes.
Gonna be a fun weekend, Bill. Where are you going this weekend, by the way?
I am finally on the couch. I'll be in the Ohio Stadium the following 2 weekends for Indiana and Michigan.
Okay.
And I've been running, as you know, I run around to lacrosse tournaments every week. I was in Indy last weekend. Indy was by the way, Indianapolis, where the lacrosse was, we had our tournament where the Pacers do practice and the Colts have a practice facility. It was great. Grant played awesome. As you can see, I got my Pickerington windbreaker on. We have Panther Madness tonight, so I'm coaching girls basketball. Couple junior Caitlin Clarks on my team. But I'm excited to be on the couch. I'll be excited to talk to you next week. One thing I wanted to promo, other than my tiebreaker stories, we have a story tomorrow about a what if, as in what if Deion Sanders would have taken the Auburn job. I think you will enjoy it. I think everybody will enjoy it. And I have so much fun on this, not just with you, but with your listeners. The chats are making me laugh. I love being on this show.
They at least need to get you that show, and I can't wait
to
read
this
your
shirt.
Yes, I can't wait to read your article when Deion takes the Florida State job. That's going to be a fun article to read as well. So, going to be fun, Bill. All right, for Bill Bender, everybody, you can find him at BillBender92 on Twitter. Of course, go to Sporting News, check out all his articles. He's been plugging it all week. Great stuff. This is Bill at his best, guys. So, definitely check that out. So, for Bill, I'm Bryan. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock, for our Irish Breakdown mailbag. So, check that out. And thank you all for joining us today on the Irish Breakdown podcast.